Commission, if everyone would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pursuant to the provisions of Section 2.68.030 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, notice is hereby given that if you are not satisfied with a decision made by the Metropolitan Transportation Licensing Commission, you may appeal the decision by petitioning for a writ of certiorari with the Davidson County Chancery or Circuit Court. Your appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of the entry of the Metropolitan Transportation Licensing Commission's decision. We advise that you seek your own independent legal advice to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements have been met. Prior to the meeting, Mr. Fields circulated last month's meeting minutes. Is there a motion regarding those minutes?
Move to approve them.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes. Next item on our agenda is an election for a Transportation Licensing Commission Chair and Vice Chair. Are there any motions regarding who to appoint as chairman or vice chair?
I'd like to make a motion to nominate the acting chair, Sal Hernandez, as the chairman of the Transportation Licensing Commission.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Now we have vice chair. As well, is there a motion regarding vice chairman?
He's not here to defend himself, but I'd like to make a motion for Tom Turner as vice chair.
I second that too.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes, so we have a new vice chair, Tom Turner. Next item on our agenda. Next item on our agenda is a public hearing. The Commission has been asked to reconsider or revise Taxi Cab Rule 7B regarding insurance rating companies, and to also consider a revision to additional changes to insurance requirements planned for September 1st, 2014. Mr. Fields?
There are actually two issues here. One issue is involving the rating companies and the ones we accept. The other is clearly, as you described, we have an additional increase scheduled for next September. We can obviously deal with them however y'all want to deal with them. The issue related to the insurance, at the point we raised the insurance rates from the 25/50/15, which existed, to the 50/100/50, and then a proposed 100/300/50, came about for a desire for increased public safety and security for the citizens and the people in the taxi cabs. During some of our meetings since then, there have been issues raised that the increase was now being, the interim increase of 50/100/50 was a onerous burden on the taxi cab drivers in terms of the fees in which they were paying for their new liability insurance was much higher than we were led to believe. They've also brought that if we go to the 100/300/100 or 50, it would even be that much higher. So that is the issue that was out there. It came up in a couple of your meetings, and we determined that it might be best for you just to see that, because the issue of the ratings companies also came up. AM Best is one of several companies that rate insurance companies around the country. It was brought to our attention that there are other companies that provide similar services. In order for that to be a full and public opportunity to discuss it, the only way to do that is in a public hearing for you to consider, should any other companies be allowed to rate, should we accept the insurance companies that are rated by other organizations beside AM Best? And that's sort of where we are now. We've worked with Metro Legal and Metro Division of Insurance, and I think Ms. Gallimore Scruggs is available to speak to that. Mr. Cobble's not available today.
And can you remind the commission, Mr. Fields, when the commission passed the new language for taxi cab 7B? Was that over the summer?
The language back in April. And it was revised in August. Again, from gathering information in the community among the industry, there some of the companies and drivers had difficulty getting to their insurance level quick enough, and we asked to defer action until December 31st. And we don't have any problem with that. We also have no problem with the uninsured motorists, which goes into effect next March.
Well, we are now at the public hearing stage. I've got a few requests to speak. I will call them in the order that they've been presented to me. Mr. Jerry Lee.
Please, the commission, my name's Jerry Lee. I'm a member of the Nashville Bar. I'm appearing today on behalf of Nashville Metro Taxi Drivers Alliance.
I'm sorry, Mr. Lee, just so I can be fair to everyone here, if you would please limit your talking points to about no more than 5 minutes, that would
I think I can do
along.
that, sir.
Thank you.
I checked my records. It's been 2 years since I appeared here on behalf of the Drivers Alliance. I realize there are alternative explanations of why they haven't felt the need for my services in the interim, but I prefer to see it as a testament to this commission's demonstrated and genuine willingness to hear what they have to say and consider their point of view when you have something before you that affects the way they earn their livelihood. So the first thing I want to do today on behalf of the Drivers Alliance is to express appreciation for the way they've been treated in the last couple of years. I think that treatment continues today. Clearly, when you passed these increases back in, I thought it was March, Mr. Fields says April, so it was April. Clearly, you knew, because of your knowledge of how taxi business works in Nashville, that these costs were going to be passed straight through to the drivers. So what you were essentially doing is increasing their cost of doing business. And I think in consideration of that, you tried to phase this increase in over a two-step process and to broaden the range of the insurers who could write policies. And now, from what I understand, you've not only pushed back some of those dates, but you're now talking about doing away with phase 2 in its entirety. We're certainly in favor of that. And all of this is because, as Mr. Fields said, it has proven to be more difficult and more expensive than you were led to believe when this was first passed. And we appreciate those accommodations that have been made to us, but what I really want to do today next is apologize. I want to express appreciation. Number 2, I want to apologize because back in April or March, whenever it was, my people dropped the ball. They should have been here. They should have expressed their point of view at that time, and they didn't, and we apologize for that. But as a result, all you heard was people who make a living selling insurance get up and tell you the world would be a better place if everybody had more insurance. There was no one here to express the point of view of the drivers, which is, are we fixing a problem that doesn't exist? It's not broke. Why are we fixing it? The minimums have worked well for years, and there's been no report or study that I'm aware of a rash of taxi patrons who were injured in Nashville and found they couldn't be properly compensated for their injuries because the driver's insurance was inadequate. There should be some rational basis between this change you want to make and the facts on the ground. And I don't know that those facts were ever developed. So I realize it's not necessarily on the agenda today, but what I would really like to ask you to do on behalf of the Alliance, what I would plead with you to do, is to reconsider the action you took back in the spring. Let's go back, and instead of doing this in a rush. Let's take our time and make sure we get it right. And let's develop a full record with some empirical evidence that there is a need to impose this additional cost of doing business on the people in the system who can least afford to bear it. I appreciate your consideration. I'd be glad to answer any questions if you have any.
I do.
Yes, sir.
Have you reviewed other cities the same size in the metropolitan area of Nashville and what they carry in your consideration of your comments today?
No, sir, I have not. As I said, I think it should be empirical evidence. If you're I believe you are, at least from the videos I've watched, I would think you're an attorney. You would know that juries in Nashville in particular tend to be rather conservative. So I don't know if looking at another city and saying, well, Atlanta has this or New York has that, if that really tells us anything. What we need is a study, an empirical study that focuses on Nashville. And do we have a problem here, or are we trying to fix something that isn't broken? So no, sir, I have not.
March and April, we looked at a study that compared the insurance coverages in Austin, Charlotte, Raleigh, cities of that size. And the recommendation of that study was that we, first of all, get some uninsured motorist coverage and then increase the rates below the minimum that was at that time to cover proactively rather than just reactively. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, proactively is good if the money's not coming out of your pocket. But in this case, my drivers, it varies from driver to driver, but you're essentially telling them they must take another day out of their month away from their family and work another day every month just to pay this increase. And they're already working way too many hours, way too many days, have too little time with their family. These are the working poor that we talk about in this country. And again, my fear is that what we're doing in an attempt to be proactive, and I applaud you for that, but in an attempt to be proactive, what we're doing is essentially putting a tax on drivers. And they're the least able to afford this increase. Anything else?
Not for me.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Dale Ambow.
I'm with Volunteer Taxi. And I'm in support of what he just said. And in addition, what I would like to say is the drivers cannot afford this increase. Please reconsider what was passed before, and please the rating agencies that please extend that one to the next one.
Thank you, Mr. Ambow. Mr. Doug Trimble.
Hey, Doug Trimble with Yellow Cab Management. All the company managers are pretty much in agreement that the first change that takes place January, absolutely agree with it. It should have been raised. We're also in agreement with Mr. Field that the one coming up for 2014 is a little unnecessary, would be too expensive for the cab owners and drivers. We're in agreement that should be deleted. As far as the insurance company's rating, I think right now it's B+. This is absolutely, in every cab company's opinion, is an absolute necessity that we maintain the insurance companies to have this rating. I mean, if the rating is dropped or they don't even have a rating, I mean, this opens the door to many lawsuits and tragic situations. So please, let's keep our insurance companies that's trying to work with our cab owners to maintain this rating that we currently have or higher. But the rating system, definitely we want to use people that's going to work with us, and that rating system is fair, and I believe we definitely should maintain what we got there. Thank you.
Mr. David McEnden.
Good afternoon. My name is Dave McIndoe with Greater Nashville Insurance. I'm here to talk about Demotech that's coming in, the new company that wants to be able to sell insurance in the state of Tennessee to the cab owners. You have, I have literature here to pass out, but I think I'm going to kind of go a little bit different route. You have the Department of Insurance, you have the insurance companies, and then you have us being a broker. Me, Nathan, and other insurance companies will consider us as the brokers. Department of Insurance goes by AM Best rating. They don't even acknowledge this new company in the state of Tennessee. Demotech's not even acknowledged. They're not a rated company with the Department of Tennessee. On insurance companies, they have to go out and they take the first risk. If you go out in your home and you get a car and you hit a mailbox and it's $3,000, 99% of all the insurance companies that do business in Tennessee will pay that $3,000 out of that insurance company's pocket. Now, if it comes a hailstorm and you leveled out a whole subdivision, that's when the company, insurance company, calls on the reinsurance to come in and help fund some of the money. On the insurance brokers as us, we have to have reinsurance. We have to have E&O insurance. E&O insurance protects me, the agent, if I make a mistake, and it protects you, the consumer, that you'll get paid if I do make a mistake. My E&O coverage is through Westport, out of the insurers of Tennessee. They don't even acknowledge the new company at all, and it's rated as a non-rated company. And if they go insolvent or if they don't pay a claim, it's out of my pocket, not my E&O insurance, because they have to be rated a B+ or higher for my E&O to be able to pay off the claim. So this has a trickle-down effect from the Department of Insurance not acknowledging them to us having E&O coverage to make sure our clients are covered in case we do make a mistake or if there's something falls through the hole, whatever may happen, that we have coverage. And then Demotech, I don't know if it's saying right or not, first dollar of their claim is paid by reinsurance. And there's an article in insurers.com regarding the Florida market being a hard market to get the insurance companies coming in because of all the storms, hurricanes, and so forth, that they've acknowledged that AM Best is the way to go, that Demotech can have A rating and overnight be insolvent because they rely so much on the reinsurance. And the reinsurance covers the whole world. China, wherever the claim is. So it has a great importance of the issue. Any questions?
What are you ultimately recommending?
To leave things the way it is on the ratings. AM Best, B+, because, again, the state doesn't acknowledge them. They're not rated with the state.
If they're not an AM Best, they're not rated with the state.
Correct.
Okay.
So what you're saying holds true for Standard & Poor's, Fitch, and Moody's?
No, Moody's is. But yet, AM Best is the trademark. It's all been, they started in 1899. They've been doing it since 1906. They're a nonprofit where Demotech is for profit. You're talking about the insurance companies volume-wise. I speak for consumers. You know, they're a $50 million company, or actually more, probably $60 million company. Hollers is a $1.1 billion company. Demotech is $3.2 million. I mean, there's a huge difference in the size of the companies. And their webpage says, we're a small company, so we can get better rates. Insurance is law of numbers. The more numbers you have, the better reduction of your rates on B. So it's really, you don't want a small one. You want somebody to be able to take the hit.
Thank you. Mr. Nathan Spears. Thanks.
I'm Nathan Spears of the Genie Insurance Agency here in Nashville. I represent several taxi cab insurance companies. And I actually agree with a lot of what David had to say just now, and with a few things that you had to say as well. Contrary to what this gentleman may think, we want customers walking through the door smiling and happy. We don't want them feeling like they're going to the dentist and getting a root canal. Perhaps the solution to everybody making plenty of money is to not have too many taxi cabs. On to the issue of best ratings and the limits and so forth. We've already ruled on this, or you have, rather. And on the first page there, I just want to draw your attention to the highlights. This is the minutes from the March meeting where Director Fields referred to the Department of Law here in the city that recommended that insurance carriers should have a best rating. If you follow your eyes to the bottom of the page, Commissioner Hernandez moved with the lovely Ms. Marco seconding that 5,150 would be adequate for now, and that they must have an AM best rating of B plus or better. On to the next page. The ordinance for other passenger vehicles for hire regulates shuttles, limousines, carriages, trolleys, etc. They were required to have a best rating of no less than A-. We've already made an exception for taxi cabs. They perform the same function, transporting human beings. I don't feel that that exception is necessarily out of line, however, because as I mentioned to Mr. McNally recently, there's pie in the sky, and then there's reality. B+ should be adequate for taxis. It's a volatile market. On to the next page, please. The Airport Authority, also a department of Metro, and go past the cover page there if you would. Their insurance requirements also require a best rating of very good or better. That language is a little antiquated, but nevertheless it makes the same point, best rating. As David McIndoe indicated, AM Best is the bona fide benchmark for not only the solvency of insurance companies, but also practices. I'm not here today to refer to Standard or talk about Standard & Poor's or Fitch and so forth, but other people have. Well, those ratings are more for investors. They're not purely for the performance, function, and solvency per se for P&C carriers. In fact, they do a comparative analysis, which we'll get to. On to the next page. I just wanted to kind of make it clear. I've got several pages here from insurance companies, and I didn't have time to, research 100 of their websites or whatever, but they only refer to AM Best. That should just kind of clarify that that is the bona fide benchmark. Insurance agencies like mine, we never refer to Fitch, Standard & Poor's, who said AIG was fine, in fact, when they were not. Even State Farm, just kind of put it in layman's terms, everybody knows State Farm. This is their annual report. What do they refer to? Best ratings. Took it a step further. I contacted an actuary from Consumers Insurance who insure arguably more cabs in the city than any single carrier. And their actuary says that Fitch is an investment measurement particularly designed for life insurers and annuity providers. They only allow a translation of AM Best. In short, Fitch ratings don't mean anything to P&C insurers since they're only an interpretation. So I looked into that on the last page. Actually went to the Fitch website. And sure enough, that's exactly what they do. If you see at the bottom there, it says the ratings shown in the AM Best scale equivalency column are not AM Best insurer financial strength ratings, but Fitch's rating of the company if it were to use AM Best rating scale. It was also indicated to me, and does not appear on the agenda, that you guys may defer your authority to the Director of Insurance for Metro and put this judgment call in the hands of one person. That's not a democratic process whatsoever. That's why we have you guys. That's why there's 7 or 8 of you sitting up there. That's not right. Quite frankly, I don't think this should even be on the table today, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Mr. Spears, can I ask you a question real quick on the other subject about the the rates of 50, 150.
Yes, sir.
I think 2 months ago you were here when there was some discussion about putting it off to December for it to become effective. And you gave us some information as to how much it was costing each cab driver, an average or an estimate of what it was costing each cab driver. Can you tell me that again today?
For new customers, it varies. It depends on what carrier you go with. You can have...
I'm more concerned about how much more over what the minimums were before. That's what I'm interested in.
On average,
Yeah.
an increase of $50 to $100 per month per car.
And how did you determine that before?
By rating it up,
So the 50, 150 that's scheduled to go into effect is going to cost each cab driver on average $50 to $100. That's a pretty wide average, but $50 to $100 you think?
approximately, yes.
A month?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Some carriers less than that, quite frankly. Just depends on what you want to do.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Mr. Paul Fisher?
Ladies, gentlemen, let me take my glasses off and I'll be less nervous. I can't see you. I'm Paul Fisher. I'm managing partner of a consultancy called the Media Consulting Group, and we have a management contract with 10 Cab LLC. We handle several management functions for them. And we appreciate the conscientious way, and this is from the heart, that the Commission looks at issues like this to ensure public safety, accountability, and to make sure that taxi cab companies and others are regulated in a moral and a fiscally responsible way. And when the Commission first began looking at these issues, while 10 Cab was just beginning to put its first fleet on the road, and so we weren't prepared to really comment on the issues and at that point. But at this point, we want to say, please, that we stand in agreement with the Drivers Association, and that your decision, we believe, can change whether or not some of our drivers and the other drivers from the other companies throughout Nashville or Davidson County are able to continue working in this business. If they're not, they could go from working poor to, well, you guys can fill in the blank. And that decision may. The Commission's decision to keep certain companies from writing insurance on Metro Nashville Cab concerns companies that are approved by the state of Tennessee. This is how we see it. These companies have been approved by the state to write millions of dollars and potentially hundreds of millions for millions of policyholders. And therefore, that's far more we see, as we understand it, than merely 1,500 cab drivers throughout Middle Tennessee. And thus, far more reserves are needed, and the state already says they can sell insurance in Tennessee. So we know the information that the Commission has certainly is not privy for everybody, but we also believe that the Commission does not have information on these companies that would mean they shouldn't be selling insurance in Tennessee. We believe if it ain't broke. Thank you all very much.
I'm going to mispronounce the first name, Mr. Kahir Ahmed. Thank you. Sure.
This is the exact question. It's going to answer the question that you asked me confused. I'm one of the plaintiff drivers, not record at all, not ticket at all, with increased $104. I had two estimations. One, that was the lower one. The other one increased $140.
Mr. Ahmed, if you could wait until you're before the microphone.
Yeah, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kahir Ahmed. First and foremost, I'm a driver, and I really do appreciate for certifying 10 Cab and awarding us a company to run. Like Paul Fisher said, we were not at the meeting back in March when these issues were discussed. We were busy putting our vehicles on the road. I'm a driver with a family of 5 who already works 12 to 14-hour shift. And I always used haulers or consumers because they were the only two companies that were selling taxi insurance. until recently, October this year, when my policy expired and I was due to renew, I've been noticed two different codes. The one that you see right now is the lower one. I was paying $271. It jumped to $408, the first one. Then I had this one that increased to $104 every month. That's $1,200 for someone who was already working 12 to 14-hour shift to make ends meet and break even. We're all trying to provide our families, serve our city, and protect our clients with adequate insurance. This is simply putting a traffic light on a highway, what it amounts to in our eyes. It is tax on ourselves. If it protects clients, we're all for it. But clients were protected. There's no issue with that. Actually, if there is something need to be fixed, it's covering drivers. We already have a member driver that lost an arm driving a cab that wasn't covered. So please, I plead you to reconsider this and look at the driver's point of view. Thank you. Appreciate it. If you have questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Mr. Ahmed, is this a statement for a year's worth of premium for insurance is $4,123?
Yes. Actually, the higher one that I got from them, I couldn't find it today. It was $4,700. So it was going from $271, my premium. Actually, I can show you what I was paying, what I paid in August. This is what I paid in August. It's $271. It's from consumers, $271. So you put that to it, or 408 minus that, it's going to be $137 increase a month.
Thank you. Miss Melinda Grant.
I'm here on behalf of Green Cab, and we are in favor of the current ordinance for the insurance. Right now, we are paying almost $10,000 a month on insurance because we own the whole fleet. And changing that is going to change our whole entire company, and it's not going to be good. So, thank you.
Lee, I have a question.
Oh, sure.
So you pay the insurance
We
for your
pay the
cabs
insurance.
because you own the cabs?
Yes.
There are other companies where the drivers own the cabs.
Right.
And they end up paying the increased premium.
Right. We're the only company that owns the whole fleet, as far as I know.
Okay, so there's that difference here between the companies that own the fleets and then the drivers that own the cabs.
Right.
Okay.
Can you be a little more specific and tell us how much your insurance premium was going to be raised per cab per month?
You know, I don't have the figures in front of me. I would have to ask Nathan. Nathan's our insurance guy. Can I?
He's right behind you.
Okay. They want to know how much that the premium is going to be raised if the
For Green
ordinance
Cab.
changes for Green Cab.
Probably 25% at the most.
Does it make a difference on the increase whether the cab's owned by an individual driver versus a company owning them?
It does not. Maybe less.
And 25% would be if it was $400, it would go up to $500?
Perhaps. It depends on the claims history of each individual policyholder, which they've done very well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak regarding taxi cab rule 7B. Sir?
My name is Mahari Widakidan. This is my first time to be here in this setting. I'm a taxi cab driver as well. And I really didn't come for this purpose. But since I'm here, it affects the drivers. I'm going to put my voice into it. What I'm going to say here is that there's only two companies really writing these policies. It's a market domination. It's not for the customers. If we are looking at the customer's well-being and the driver's well-being, then this issue needs to be carefully looked at as how it's impacting as far as the drivers that are in the car for 14, 16 hours every day, and also what kind of impact it will have in terms of the customers that are riding these taxis. It's all about money. We can't go to other companies and bring in outside companies even to sell insurance here. In fact, I looked at the option of being an insurance agent myself. Maybe this is a better option. And I can't sell insurance because the market is already locked. They don't want to hire even new agents to sell the consumers and the haulers and all these companies that are already in the market. So my voice that I want to bring here is, the drivers are working too many hours. And we need to look at, at these drivers giving a break, spend some more quality time with their families, less overhead expenses to operate their business, because these are taxpayers. We are all taxpayers. And do not overburden, because it creates a safety issue. When drivers are on the road for too many hours, it's a hazard. So, we need to consider all those things when we are looking at this insurance issue. It's not just insurance, but it's also the well-being of the customer and at the same time the driver. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Fields, is there a limit to the number of hours a driver can drive in a day, in a 24-hour period?
I don't believe it's in the ordinance. There's a limit.
24.
Well, I don't believe it specifically address how many hours they can operate.
Interesting.
At this point, we're going to close the public hearing portion regarding taxi cab rule 7B, and now the commission will deliberate regarding the request to revise taxi cab rule 7B. We had a study done in 2012 that recommended liability insurance to be increased to limits of 100, 300, 100, and received advice from the Metropolitan Department of Law recommending the same level of coverage as the report was suggesting. So we have deliberated this issue with care in two separate meetings. In the last meeting, we revised downward the rating that we had first passed to B+, and also, actually, I misspoke. We actually considered having a higher rating, and then lowered it to B+. And then later this year, we pushed out the dates. And the current iteration of the rule that's about to take effect is effective on December 31st, 2013, all licensed taxi cabs to have liability insurance coverage of 50, 100, 50. And then on March 14th, all licensed taxi cabs must carry uninsured motorist coverage of $25.50.15. And then on September 1, 2014, all licensed taxi cabs must have liability insurance coverage of $100, $350 in property coverage. And all the carriers are required to have at least a AM Best rating of B+ or better. I haven't heard anything here today that makes me want to reconsider the rule that we have in place right now, but I'd like to hear from some of the other commissioners.
Well, I haven't heard anything that would justify amending or changing the B+ rating and using AM Best. So I think that would be the easier one of the two. I've heard the cab company represent that they want us to maintain the rates of 100 or 50, 150 that go in effect January 1st. They've suggested that maybe the rates, the second step of increase in May, to be scheduled for May of 2014, might not be necessary. I listened to Mr. Lee carefully with a sound argument and a passionate argument on behalf of those who probably, in many of the cases, are going to be burdened with the cost for this increase. I agree. We reviewed this carefully back in March and again looked at it later. We relied upon a study that was commissioned by the city that recommended the increase. We compared it to other cities that have looked at it and studied it as well. We considered what might happen if there was an accident involving multiple vehicles and multiple passengers in a vehicle, in a cab, and considered that the 100, 300, or the 50, 150 was appropriate to go into effect starting in 2014. And what I learned here today is there's a different types of companies out there. Those companies that, obviously I knew those companies that own their cabs who are bearing the cost, who stood up here today and said they're in favor of maintaining what we've already deliberated and decided on. And then those individuals who are working very, very hard, many hours, and scraping by, who are looking at increases of $50 to $100 a month, and as was demonstrated here today, of $104 a month. The one thing I do remember, though, is that every time we've come up with the opportunity to issue more permits, it doesn't matter whether it's a driver-owned company or whether it's a company that owns their own cabs, people come in wanting more permits. It would suggest to me that despite the long hours and the cost of doing business, people want to engage in this business. So my thought is that I don't see anything today that says, despite the burden of the extra cost to do the business, I think I would stay with what we have decided already.
Is that a motion?
Well, it's done.
Is there anyone else who'd like to comment?
No, I think B+ is good. As their definition states. Anything below good is fair and
I agree with that.
It's secure. B+ is rated secure. Anything below that is vulnerable. I think that was a good decision.
Do we stay with AM Best as the rating?
I believe so, too.
Well, I'll make a partial motion. That is that we not, a motion that we not revise or change what had previously been decided to stay with a B+ rating and use an AM Best as the company for the rating.
I'd like to make sure that that's okay to make a partial motion as opposed to a motion resolving all the issues before we take a second on that.
I'm going to look at Metro Legal and ask the question. If you take no action, the rule stands. If you make no motion and take no action, the rule will stand. If you want to change any part of the rule, then you would make a motion to actually change the rule. So if no motion, you're basically leaving it the way, it's like making a motion, just leaving it alone, I guess is the way to put it.
I'll withdraw my motion.
That's right.
Would anyone like to make a motion addressing the entirety of the issue here of whether or not we leave the rule as is or make an adjustment to it?
I make a motion that we leave it as it is in its entirety.
Is there a second to the motion?
If we need a second to leave it the way it is, I would second it. I will second it.
All those in favor of taking no action with regard to the rule, taxi cab rule 7B, say aye.
Aye.
There you have it, Mr. Fields. Next, we have a public hearing on consideration of revising Horse and Carriage Rule 9 regarding the adoption of traffic and parking staff operational zones. Mr. Fields.
The rule was adopted in 2011 that standardized a route which all of the carriages would be required to stay on except in special circumstances. After a lot of study, conversation, and review of how it was working on the street, it was pretty apparent to me that it was a relatively short route, but it was also putting an additional stress on the companies and the drivers and the horses and the passengers, for that matter, into being close confines. We asked the Metro Council to change the law, which would give the the Traffic and Parking Commission staff the authority to establish routes or zones in which carriages would operate. This rule, you'll notice, Ordinance 2013-551 basically amended the Code of Law pertaining to routes for horse-drawn carriage operation by giving the ability of the zones, by being able to create zones and then changing the duties of the staff. So basically what this amounts to is I'm asking you to accept a rule, to delete the rule that's there now, and basically allow the Traffic and Parking Commission staff, which has the authority in the old order, had it before and still now the Commission had it, now the staff has it. We still don't have the authority to establish the zones. Basically, we're just asking you by a rule to accept whatever they establish as zones or routes, and then direct your staff to work with them if any additional assistance is needed.
No, there's traffic and parking currently.
Well, there could be a conflict, and again, I'm acting like Metro Legal now, and I don't mean to do that. There could be a conflict if they did one thing and they have the authority to establish it, and then we're saying, and the Transportation Licensing Commission says this is what you have to stay on. We would have two different agencies. They actually have the authority to establish either zones or routes. You could ask them to adopt the routes that are here. Basically, when we met with the Traffic and Parking Commission, because of the dynamics of downtown, the reason we really sought this, in addition to relieving some of the issues that are on the street, was to allow Commission staff to be able to be nimble in their actions and be able to move quickly for a special event. Because special events, Nashville has become a special event city in many ways, and the zones the old route was affected almost every time, which kept people off route, which caused more confusion and made enforcement very difficult. This basically would allow them to establish zones. For instance, they could establish a downtown zone that went from 1st Avenue to 7th Avenue, from Korean Veterans Boulevard to the courthouse. And then they could say, we don't want you on this street or this street, but anywhere in that zone is where you'd operate. They would still establish the carriage stands, but the companies would be able to operate. They could do one in the Gulch and say, this is a Gulch route, a Bicentennial Mall Germantown route or zone. So basically, you're adopting whatever they promulgate.
It'll make the whole process of the carriage drivers
To get efficient routes, will get their special events especially a lot quicker, so, okay.
Well, all of the carriage companies have specific routes they would like to run. With the current rule, they have a specific route they have to run. Some want to go in Printer's Alley, some don't. Printer's Alley wants them to. So it's not on the route, but there are things like that.
It'll also relieve a lot of the congestion down on 2nd and Broadway.
We hope.
Yeah.
I believe it will.
Thank you, Mr. Fields. This is a public hearing on this issue. I have not received any requests to speak on this issue from the public, but I would like to ask, is there anyone who would like to speak regarding revising Horse and Carriage Rule 9? All right, well then we will deliberate this issue now. Are there any commissioners that would like to speak on the issue or the suggested revision or make a motion?
I like it.
I do too. I think it's a good idea that we need to do something. And I think that we need to make a change.
And I'd love to make a motion, but I'm a little unclear as exactly what the wording needs to be for this to work.
Well, what I suggest is the Transportation Licensing Commission adopts the horse and carriage operational routes and/or zones developed and approved by the Traffic and Parking Commission staff and directs the TLC staff to assist the traffic and parking staff if necessary.
Yes.
I'd make a motion that the suggested revisions by Mr. Fields be passed as written in the notes that I received.
I second.
I think you'll need to actually speak what those changes will be.
The revisions are, the motion is that the Transportation Licensing Commission adopts the horse and carriage operational routes and/or zones developed and approved by Traffic and Parking Commission staff and directs Transportation Licensing Commission staff to assist TMP staff if necessary.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you for writing it down so clearly. I will look right over the top of it.
Yeah, well said, Pat.
Vice Chairman.
Thank you. This next item on the agenda involves wreckers. We have an Emergency Wrecker Association request regarding owner towing requests at accidents. Mr. Fields.
The Emergency Wrecker Association, which is made up of the emergency zone operators that you approve on an annual basis, have had an ongoing issue related to what constitute when they should be exclusively working accidents on the streets. In other words, if it's an accident, they believe the ordinance specifically requires them to do it. Currently, that certainly happens most of the time. However, if someone is in an accident and they ask for a specific tow service to come in, they're now being allowed for that company to come in. I'm confident that they're going to explain some of the issues that go along with that, and this has been an ongoing conversation that I've had with them since y'all allowed me to be your interim director. And I think it probably is something that needed to come. They wanted to appear in front of you to explain exactly what it is. Metro Legal is certainly familiar with the processes, and I'm reasonably familiar with them. So they asked to appear, and I thought it made sense for them just to be able to speak to you directly.
If there was an accident in, let's say, Zone A, wouldn't it default to whoever that wrecker is in that zone if the police call?
What would normally happen if you have a wreck in whatever zone, there's a wrecker company that's assigned to that zone. The police are obligated to contact that wrecker company. If that company is not available, then there's a backup. Another emergency company is the backup. Their role there is to clear the accident. They have to be there within 30 minutes. They then have to clear any of the debris, clean the street. If that requires bringing additional equipment or whatever else, they're held to a much higher standard than the general wrecker companies. And again, I think that's probably what they're going to want to talk about, so it's probably better for them too.
Is there a representative here from Dad's Towing?
I'm Joe Mitchell with Dad's Towing in West Nashville Wrecker. appreciate the commission taking the time to hear our concerns. We're not here to damage the general towing companies in any way. It's pretty well self-explanatory. General towing company, we have a problem. Anyone in this room can call a general towing company for a general tow anytime. But allowing a general towing company to do an emergency tow there's a large difference. Not only is it a standard of the company, we're held to be there within 30 minutes, and I'll give you a few examples of things that's actually happened. Our insurance, our lots, our equipment requirements, everything that we do is at a different level. Not that a general towing company might not be capable of doing it, but they're not doing it and they're not held to the same standard. What happens if anyone actually have the ordinance to see one of them? I think I have some copies here. If you don't mind, I'll pass these out. If you will turn to the second page of this, under Metro Code 6.80.515 emphasizes that no person shall engage in the business of providing emergency wrecker service without first obtaining and keeping in force a license to operate emergency wreckers. And what is an emergency situation? I guess that's the first thing we need to really discuss, and it also goes further and it explains what an emergency situation is. Emergency situation occurs when a vehicle is parked, stopped, or standing in violation of any regulation or ordinance of the metropolitan government. When a vehicle is parked, stopped, or standing so as to obstruct the orderly flow of traffic, or when a vehicle is disabled by an accident and constitutes or obstructs the traffic, and its immediate removal of storage for safekeeping is necessary in the interest of public safety. Well, that alone sort of explains that most of the general towing companies, a lot of the general towing companies don't even have a storage lot to start out with. And I'm going to give you an example that happened to me about 2.5 years ago when I was still driving. Unfortunately, I don't get to drive as much as I used to because of administrative duties now, but I was on a call. It's been 1.5 years, 2 years ago, and approached this particular call. Police officer was there. I backed up to the vehicle as we normally do to tow it. Police officer came up to me and says, "I need to ask you to stop. The customer's called his own towing company." I said, "Okay, no problem." I immediately called dispatch, asked for another call. They gave me another call, and I pursued to finish the call. I completed the call, came back by an hour and 15 minutes later. They were still sitting there. So I just, as a courtesy, stopped again and asked the officer, "Is anything I can do to help you?" Of course, he was not in a very good mood at that time because he'd been sitting there that long. He says, "No, we're still waiting on the tow company." So we're required to be there in 30 minutes, but there is no requirements on them to be there at any certain time. Now, numerous situations have occurred as far as the cleanup process. A lot of the general companies don't have cleanup equipment and are not required to have it. Some of them do. We have been called out to actually do the cleanup only. Well, they'll call us, we'll go out. No, we've got a general towing company. We go back, 30, 45 minutes later, I need you to come over here and clean this up. They've left the mess there, so we go clean the mess up. Now, do we get paid for that? Absolutely not. This has happened quite often. We're not trying to hurt them in any way. We're just trying to distinguish the difference between the two, and there is a large difference. Mr. David Williams with TowPro and Cottons provided some really good stats that helps out a lot. Had 230 canceled calls last year and 271 canceled calls this year. What it does is sort of an example. Your driver's asleep at home. It's night when a lot of your wrecks occur. You get it. You call him. The dispatch calls him, gets him out of bed. He heads to the call, and sometimes before he gets there, he's called off. Sometimes when he gets there, he goes back. That creates a situation between our drivers and us. Of course, they want to be paid. We're not paid. So you have to do something to compensate them, to keep them from leaving you because, you've called them out. It actually costs, just to move the vehicle from the time that driver leaves there, $55.74. That's the total expense. That's the truck payment, insurance cost, the receptionist. I'll give you the exact figures. The truck payment per call is $18.22. Insurance costs $15.20. The receptionist and driver $18.82, and fuel costs at just $3.50 doesn't give you a gallon of fuel. They average 6 to 7 miles to a gallon. So if you go very far, it's more than that. So you lose money every time that happens, which is not a big deal. We're not complaining about the money, but it's becoming such a large amount of it now that it's starting to really affect everyone. What we would like is for a judgment on what is actually the rule now. It says clearly that they're not allowed to do that. We feel like the emergency record services should be allowed to do the emergency towing only, and we are prepared and equipped to do that. Well, we go a little bit further along with it because some of the cleanups we do actually involve even a bobcat and a broom on the front of it. But generally, it's a broom, you're required to have cutters to cut stuff with, you're required to have a scoop to clean it up with, you're required to have a storage place to put it, some way to retain it, and you wouldn't believe sometimes you almost have to have another truck. There's so much material damage. Bumpers off, hoods off, fenders tore off. We've had them with the whole side of the car off before. But you do have to do the cleanup on it complete, and then you have to bring it back to its natural state.
Why are there so many canceled calls?
Well, it's increasing every year. I also, before I came here, I went to the police department because I didn't want to do anything behind their back so they would understand what we were doing, what we were asking for. And I spoke with the Deputy Chief, Todd Henry. And, of course, his decision on this was he would respect whatever this commission decides on. They're being allowed to do it by the police department at their request. And, why it's happening, I really have no idea why it's happening. It just becomes more and more often, which is issuing us a problem.
So what you're saying is if there's a wreck, then they call you if it's your zone,
That's
and
correct.
you get in the car, or you send someone in their car, the vehicle, to go out there, and by the time you get there, the person who owns the car says, wait a minute, I'd rather have my person come and pick it up. They have a tow truck, and they'll take it to my dealership or whatever, or my dealer will come pick it up. And you're saying that if there's something to be cleaned up, it's not being cleaned up, they're just taking the car.
That's right.
And, okay.
Or they may not show up within the 30 minutes
Within the
required
30 minutes.
required of the emergency record service.
Whenever.
We've actually had neighbors come out with a trailer hooked behind their truck and try to pull them up on her, and we've actually had to help them push them by phone there. I mean, everything has happened that you can imagine. It's just clear that there's a big difference in a general towing company and an emergency towing company. We all started out as general towing companies, and it took us a long time to advance up to an emergency towing company. And so I understand exactly where the general towing company is, too. But as I say, if any one of you call it, you can choose who you're going to call in a general situation anytime. But an emergency situation is totally different.
How many emergency towing companies are in Davidson County?
Every zone company. Every zone company is an emergency towing company.
And that's how many? 7?
How many zones is there now? Did they change rate? 16? 16 total. Yeah.
And why do you not get paid if you get called out to do the cleanup?
Well, they won't issue us a number. The police department won't issue us a number on it, so we don't get paid anything for it. They have to issue us a number for us to submit for payment.
Okay.
But they make you clean it.
Oh, yes.
You
They've
must
actually
clean
called
it.
us back to clean up before. And we do that as a courtesy. We don't want to have any problems because of it, so we do it as a courtesy just to try to stay in good faith with them.
This is the ordinance, correct?
Yes, sir.
And it's pretty clear. It says it defines what an emergency record service is, and it defines also what an emergency situation is. If the zone has an emergency wrecker, they're number one trained, they're prepared, they have to get there in 30 minutes. I mean, Nashville traffic's getting pretty bad. If there's a police officer sitting out there for an hour and 15 minutes, that's not good. This is defined quite clearly.
I'd like to go just a little further than that with it too, though, is just the time factor. And I know that y'all have never been involved in this industry and you don't know why we're required to get there that quick. Once that first accident happens, if it's not cleared up in a reasonable amount of time, another accident happens. I've seen as many on the interstate as 10 other accidents happen because of that. Especially with the larger companies that do the big truck wrecks, it's extremely important to get them moved quickly. And that's why we're required, even at that point, to have a lane, at least one lane opened in a certain amount of time. We have to. Even if we have to take a bulldozer to clear the lane, we have to do that.
In traffic accident scenarios, do you find that your payment comes from insurance companies?
Most of the time.
Okay.
Most every time, sure. And we're at a price. It's controlled.
No,
the price is controlled.
I understand. It just, for my clarity, it's a difference between somebody saying, "Well, this is coming out of my pocket," and it's not really coming out of their pocket. The insurance company is actually paying for the service.
You know, it's involved in an accident nearly every time. It is.
Okay.
Call somebody else.
So is this the recommendation that somehow the language be changed to where only emergency record services are allowed to respond to an emergency situation?
No, it's just to stop general record services from being allowed to do emergency record calls, which is actually how it's written right now, but not being enforced that way.
And who would be the enforcer?
Well, we would have to go back to Deputy Chief Todd Henry on that.
Okay.
As I say, he asked that said he would respect y'all's decision on what to do with this.
Okay.
Because they realize that we've talked with them multiple times about this happening for the last couple of years. If it wasn't getting so much worse, then we wouldn't be considering it. It wouldn't be as bad, but every year it tends to get a little worse.
I think part of the issue here is the way emergency situation is defined in the Metro Code. It's very broad, and it includes more than just a traffic accident.
It does.
It could be a stalled vehicle that's just stuck in the driving lane.
Yes, sir. It can be. It can be a stalled vehicle right in the middle of an intersection, and that obstructs traffic and causes other accidents.
What about a stalled vehicle in on the interstate, the other lane is to the right there?
The shoulder.
The shoulder, yeah. Isn't that a violation of Isn't that a violation of the regulations to be parked in the shoulder?
Yes, sir, it is. If it's parked to the left on the interstate, it's always a violation.
Yeah.
On the right side, most of the interstates, not all of them, but most of them have a place to pull over there. There's about 6 or 7 locations in Nashville. Of course, you can't pull over on the right side at all, but if you pull your vehicle to the left, if you're tailing on the interstate, you pull off to the left or are forced to pull off to the left, yes, that is a violation. I've actually witnessed one that got hit by sitting there, too, by a truck coming down the interstate that pulled off to the left.
I can see the safety issues here. Is this a code issue or is this a rule issue?
I mean, as far as I can tell, the code sections that Mr. McGovern is referring to in his letter, he's sort of asking you all for an interpretation of the code sections, and possibly it would require a code change in order to clear up the ambiguity. But my thought is, and I don't have the citation at my fingertips, is that there is yet another provision of the Metropolitan Code that speaks to this issue, and that if we were going to affect the change in practice that Mr. Govern is describing, might have to be addressed as well. And I haven't had time to look at that issue. And, basically, we would probably like to look at this a little further before we could come up with a recommendation from the legal department.
I think speaking for myself, the points that were made by Jim with Dad's towing seem reasonable, and that we want this to be done in a way that fits the rules, the 30 minutes and the cleanup that we all want done. But if we need to look at this a little further, can we move it back to December? We don't have to rule on it, but I think
for action until legal has an opportunity to fully look at it. Because again, this has been something that has evolved over a period of years through practice. As much as I think there's some I think there's some ordinance issues that may be there, but it's also been a practice because it's your car, and we've talked about that. We get it, but when there is an accident in the middle of the street, it needs to be moved. So that's an issue that they want to bring forward.
I want to clean up 30 minutes, and we can enforce that on the emergency record, but I want it to be done so that we actually do it the right way.
It may be that it may end up needing to be a code change recommendation that you all would recommend to the Metro Council, but I'm sorry, I'm just not prepared to identify all the relevant sections of the code at this point.
We won't hold it against you.
Thank you.
I would, if we need a motion, I'd request that we ask our legal counsel to do that research for us.
Right. And I'd like some clarification of what the remedy would be, what action would be required, if any, from us.
I'm sorry.
I'd like some clarification of what the remedy would be to reach the goals that have been expressed by the commission today.
And I'm not necessarily sure that a motion is necessary. I'm confident if you ask Metro Legal to do this, they'll do that.
Well, then I withdraw it. I don't want to over motion.
You might want to defer the agenda item until we have the opportunity.
Okay.
Move deferral.
Second. And we're deferring to the next scheduled meeting.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're going to defer this issue to our next scheduled meeting then. I know at that meeting, I'd like some clarification on what we can require general record service providers to do as well if they're asked to respond to an emergency situation.
I believe that is already clear and pretty clear that any record service that responds to an accident is supposed to clean up the parade.
I think that is the case. I'm not sure it's always the practice. Again, I know from firsthand experience over the years we've had, I once had to request, when I was in this job the first time, we once moved a burned-out trailer that had somehow or another ended up in the middle of the street that had nothing to do with the car, but because it was in the middle of the street, the emergency records were the ones called to move it.
Well, I guess while we're investigating, maybe we should see what is the results if they don't show up. They're an hour and a half to show up. What happens to them at that point? Do they lose their general license, or what goes after that? Because it's some of them are a lot more than even an hour and a half. So,
well, you all would be in trouble.
But we would be in serious trouble.
Yeah.
Because we definitely don't want to lose our emergency license. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda is a request from Mr.
Billy?
Mike Copeland for a record driver permit.
Billy, there's somebody back there who, he's asking for something and
I'm sorry. Are you Mr. Parrish? I apologize if we back up. We're going to back up on the item on the agenda. You did ask to speak on this issue, and even though we've deferred, you understand we've deferred the issue until January. I believe that's going to be when our next scheduled meeting is. Would you like to speak now, or would you like to speak in January on this issue?
Well, it just seemed like it was a really negative flow on a general towing company going. So I want to see if I can slow that negativity down just a little bit. I've been in the towing business for years, and I've worked hundreds of towing accidents, or auto accidents. The first thing is the scene is secured by the police department before any towing company is ever called. So it's a closed down area that's in control by either the Metro Police Department, THP, TDOT. It's a closed area. They're in charge of the area. If an insurance company or a roadside service or a body shop or a mechanic shop or a towing service family member, family friend, church member, whatever, uses them, they should have the right to call who they want to call. Now, the 30-minute deal, we're all held to that. If an independent company comes out there and they're not there in 30 minutes, they call his own company. That's what they do. You know, if they can't make it there in 30 minutes, they'll tell them. We can't, we'll be there in 45. The officer said he can't wait that long. They call his own company. We're held to the same standards as they are. Now, most of the time when people call us, it's going somewhere. It's going to a shop, a body shop. They want to take it back to their house. They don't have insurance, whatever. They just try to keep their costs down, and that's what we do. And there's just a lot of aspects to this. Maybe you should just look into it a little more, and I'll hold off on a lot of the stuff I have to say until the next meeting. But there's a lot of things to think about on this that can affect a lot of companies, especially independent companies. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parrish. You brought up some points that I think we were already thinking about, and hopefully we'll get more clarification at the next meeting.
Thank you so much.
Next item on our agenda is a request from Mike Copeland for a record driver permit. Mr. Fields.
Mr. Copeland has been a record driver in Nashville for several years now. Certainly, he's capable and he has representation. 18 months ago, he made application to get his permit back. You had revoked his permit for some violations, I think, related to some towing violations on non-consent towing. At that meeting, the commission basically said, come back in 18 months and we will reconsider the application. Some of you were here 18 months ago. You may or may not remember. But he appears, he's reapplied. He's had no additional problems on his background check, and again, his attorney's also provided an additional information that I think that I provided in your packet.
All right. We respectfully request the board grant his application.
All right. Fellow commissioners, have y'all had a chance to review his application for a driver permit?
Yes.
Yep. Is there a motion regarding his request for a record driver permit?
I move for its approval.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations. Next item is a request from Mr. Salmon DeBon for a General Wrecker Company Car 1 and driver permit.
Mr. DeBon's application for Car 1 wrecker as a general wrecker service, and he was, I was going to say he was here, is in order. There, he has provided all the information. However, on his driver application, he failed to fully reveal. That's not true. I apologize. Everything is in order. His application is in order, and we move that you approve it.
I'll make a motion for approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Congratulations. Next item on our agenda, we've got requests for record driver permits from Maurice Jennings, Walter Lee Johnson, and Daniel Martin. Mr. Fields.
Mr. Jennings is present. In making his application, Mr. Jennings failed to list two charges. One was a 2011 charge for drug paraphernalia, and the other was the casual possession of scheduled drugs. When we did his background check, that came up. We asked him. He has reapplied and has now fully disclosed everything and is asking for permission to drive.
What company is
You're making reference to Mr. Jennings?
What? If I ask a question?
Go right ahead.
What drug was possession of?
Marijuana.
And how long does that stay in the system? Don't we have a drug expert here somewhere? Mr. McNowan?
I might want to qualify that, but my understanding is 28 to 30 days.
So we could require drug tests?
Ms. Jennings, you going to pass the drug test today?
I'm not sure about today.
Well, he's honest.
Did you hear did you understand the question?
Yes, ma'am.
That you could not pass a drug test today?
I'm not 100% sure that I will today.
And you're previous charges that you had failed to disclose, they were eventually dismissed and expunged?
Yes, sir.
You weren't placed on probation?
No, sir.
All right. No drug test after the court or anything?
No, sir.
Okay. Why won't you pass today?
Well, my birthday was recently, and I did use marijuana. It was probably a week or two ago. Yes.
Did you know you were going to be here today?
No, I did not.
If you had known, would you still be celebrating the same way?
No, sir. And it's only occasional, you know, so.
We have an honest applicant.
Mr. Jennings, you know, I thank you for your candor, but I don't believe, I might be surprised, but I don't believe that we're going to be having a motion regarding granting your driver permit today. But if any of the commissioners would like to make a motion regarding Mr. Jennings' application for a driver permit.
I would, this is what I'd like to move deferral, and when Mr. Jennings comes in with a drug test that is clean, and then when we approve him, if we have a 30-day test requirement on him, I'd be fine with that. I don't know if that's a motion really or not, but I move deferral.
I second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Mr. Jennings, we're going to defer your application. Did you give a time frame?
I would defer it until our next scheduled meeting, but I did not give a time frame.
Can you make that motion then?
I would defer Mr. Jennings' application until the next regularly scheduled meeting of the Transportation Licensing Commission.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Jennings, we're going to defer your application to the next scheduled meeting. I would strongly encourage you to cease partaking any use of any kinds of drugs whatsoever. You'll be required to take periodic drug tests. I'm fairly certain if we do grant your driver permit going forward.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Fields, I think the next person is Walter Lee Johnson.
Mr. Johnson has applied to be a driver for Cotton's Towing. When we received his background check, he was initially disapproved where he failed to reveal a 2006 domestic violence charge. He has
2006 domestic assault. It was 15.
Excuse me, I skipped into the next one. I apologize. The reason he's in front of you is he has listed 19 charges, which are too many for staff to be able to approve. We wanted you to be able to see them.
Are we talking about Mr. Johnson's?
Yes, I apologize. I've got a stack of them here. Yeah, charges as recent. He's revealed charges as recently as October 7th of this year, June of this year, August of this year. I did not feel comfortable approving on your behalf.
Mr. Johnson, I'm looking at these 19 charges, and geez, almost all of them have been dismissed. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
I'm kind of puzzled as to why you'd be charged so many times then they all would be dismissed.
Well, if you look, like the majority of them are actually like driving on suspended. So it's like at the time I didn't have the money to get my license. So it was like by the time I went back to court and stuff, I actually had paid all the stuff that it took to obtain my license. So
You see those in 2011, 2010, but what about the drug paraphernalia, the possession?
I did a class for that, and the other one I had to pay a $250 fine.
You pass a drug screen today?
I should be able to.
Mr. Fields, has anything been done to verify that all these charges were dismissed?
Also, just looking at just looking at what was already on the record, we didn't find all the charges are not all listed on the record. Most recently, he was found guilty on 10/7/13 on a misdemeanor charge of possession of casual exchange of a controlled substance. His record is he's showing it closed, and it is closed with a guilty disposition.
Are you still under probation or anything like that?
No, sir. I just had to pay fines and stuff.
You're not sure if you could pass a drug test today?
No, because when I lost my job, I actually was like using or whatever. That was about a month ago. So I'd rather be safe than sorry, to be honest.
What was your previous job?
I actually was a maintenance man for Roberts Park Apartments off of South 7 in Lenore.
Is your driver's license in good standing now?
Yes, sir.
I'd be inclined to make the same motion we did with the other, with Mr. Jennings, I think was the other gentleman's name.
Mr. Martin, I believe it was.
It was Mr. Jennings, I believe.
Yeah, Maurice Jennings. We deferred until January. Give him a chance to come to get clean off of drugs. Mr. Johnson, if you do you want to, would you quit doing drugs in order to get your wrecker permit?
Yes, sir. Well, one of the reasons I quit is so I can get another job. So, I mean, I quit so I can keep a job.
So let me ask you something. If it weren't for the fact that you needed to get a job, you would continue to use?
Nah, I wouldn't. Because, like, it costs a lot of money. And, like, I got 2 kids now, so it's like it costs me more to use than it would not to use.
So your only motivation, again, is still for employment?
Nah, my kids, because they still got to eat.
What kind of drugs?
Just marijuana.
I'd make a motion to defer to the January meeting, give Mr. Johnson a chance to get his system clean, also with the realization that if we do approve his request for a permit, that he would be on mandatory drug testing.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
What day in January? Or are you going to send me a letter?
We have to schedule those meetings, which we're going to be doing at the end of our meeting.
Okay, thank you.
We will notify both of them, Mr. Chris, and we'll ask those drug tests to be sent directly to our office so we can report them directly to you.
Next, we have an application from Daniel Martin.
Mr. Martin applied, and when we reviewed, and this is where I jumped ahead just a moment ago, he had failed to list a 2006 domestic violence charge. On his reapplication, he's listed everything that needed to be listed. That was in 2006.
What was that domestic violence charge for?
It was a heated argument that was between my daughter's mother and her brother. It just escalated, and neighbors called the cops because of the yelling and stuff, and I don't know why, but they ended up taking actually both of us to jail just because I had to take somebody to jail, I guess.
Were you charged with something?
I'm sorry?
Were you charged with something?
Domestic, yes.
And you were found guilty, not guilty?
Found guilty, yes.
Guilty.
That was supposed to have been expunged, though. I'm not sure why it's even still showing on my record. As far as employment, driving tow truck, driving a tow truck outside of Davidson County.
Who's with you today?
Representative from the tow company.
You passed the drug test today?
Yes, sir. Willing to be put on probationary period of choosing random drug screens.
You had a felony possession of Schedule II conviction?
Yes, sir.
Okay. 2008?
Yes, sir.
Were you on probation?
I was.
Okay. How long?
I was on probation for 5 years, which has been completed.
Yeah, April of this year, I guess.
August, actually.
August of this year?
Yes, sir.
Where's that at? Rutherford County?
Yes, sir.
I did see that there was a couple violations of probations listed in here. What was those? What happened?
Well, I was initially on probation for another possession charge, and during that charge, it was supposed to have been a 1 year, and then it was to be expunged. And then during that time, ended up catching the other possession charge, and there's actually 2 charges that were applied that day, and I guess that's why, I don't know why it's showing 2 violations.
What was the Schedule II drug that you were caught with?
Not sure how the schedules are exactly, but one was marijuana and one was cocaine.
And you were on probation for the marijuana case when you were arrested on the cocaine case?
Correct.
Okay. And that's what caused the probation violation on the marijuana case?
Correct.
And they put you on probation on the cocaine case?
Yeah, well, I actually served 6 months in jail.
Split confinement?
Yeah. Okay. And then I got out and did 5 years on probation and extensive fees, fines. Like I said, that's all been completed with no other charges and no other trouble since then.
While on probation, how'd you do on your drug screens?
Always passed.
I want to hear from the...
Yeah, is that someone from Elk?
Yeah. Sir, if you could identify who you're with.
My name's Clark Proctor. I'm with Alcar National Recovery, and I'm here to represent him for our company. He basically right now he's working out of Davidson County. He works the Columbia area, and he really needs the permit to be able to come to our office and be able to work Davidson County. As of right now, he's having to stash all his cars out of town, and we're having to go get them and transport them back for him. It would really help a whole lot if he could definitely get this permit.
How long has Mr. Martin been with you?
It's about 6 months.
I think it was right around May or June that I started.
Yeah. So, and we've not had no problem out of him. He works hard. He's got kids he needs to take care of. He's a good employee. I mean, he's made some mistakes. Everybody has,
That was something I wanted to add too. During the time that I got in all that trouble, I was a single guy, just running around dumb pretty much. Since then, I've been married, still married, and I have a family of 8 kids that I'm providing for. So, and it's very hard to get a decent paying job with my background, and I found one that's a decent paying job that's willing to give me a chance, and it's worked out so far, and I would just really like to get the permit to be able to continue working this job and not have to go search for another one.
And you said you'd be willing to undergo periodic drug screening?
Yes, sir.
I make a motion that we approve the permit.
Could you clarify your motion, please?
I make a motion that we approve the application for a permit.
And there's a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're getting right through this thing.
Next item on the agenda is regarding taxi cabs. There's an appeal from taxi cab driver Joe Lawrence following a positive drug test. Mr. Fields.
Mr. Lawrence has been a cab driver for a number of years in Nashville. During the application process, a positive drug screen came forward. Mr. Lawrence immediately, because he was not actually notified before the office was notified, he immediately came to the office to make sure that we were aware of what was going on. He subsequently went and took did an additional test that was actually a hair analysis. That one proved negative. It was a relatively odd situation because, again, his history didn't indicate anything for us, and his record doesn't indicate any issues at court like this. But more than that, in the renewal process, in the part of the ordinance that applies to a positive drug test, it talks about a renewing driver. A new driver. It does not discuss a renewing driver. So basically, again, from my standpoint, I had no guidance to go other than to ask to come in front of you to appeal his application. Typically, what would happen, a renewing driver would be required to wait 6 months and then come and appeal back to the commission for approval of the permit. I will say, and again, I'm certainly not expert, and I'm hoping Mr. McNally might be, but in the hair analysis, I'm told that the drugs actually stay in the hair analysis for a longer period of time than they would through a urinalysis or a blood screen.
Commissioners, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Lawrence?
What was it positive for? Which cocaine?
Never done it. Second test was a lab selected by him.
It was
Yes, sir.
It was one of the local drug labs that
Selected by you? Actually, I have a nurse who recommended it to me. There's several of them in Nashville, but he said that one was probably the least expensive. It cost me, so far, drug testing alone in this situation has cost me $463.
You here for it or with him?
Doug Kreml-Yelkin, the only reason we're here is that, as Mr. Phil stated, he provided a test directly afterward, a hair analysis, which is, and it was negative. So that was confusing to us a little bit. So we just wanted to come and see what was going on with him. But if this comes out in his favor for a probationary period or whatever, we as a company would like Mr. Fields' office provided and demanded from the board that Mr. Fields' office be provided a random drug screen for at least a year on a monthly basis at random for a year. That's the only way we will accept this gentleman back. And the only reason we're here to begin with is he provided a negative drug screen, a hair analysis, negative drug screen directly after this supposedly happened to him. But if the board
foresees, making Mr. Lawrence provide a random drug screen on a monthly basis, at least once a month, for 12 months to Mr. Fields' office, then we would allow him to come back. That's the only circumstances that we would.
Mr. Fields, who bears the cost for the drug screen?
He would bear the cost of the drug screen. He or the company.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. You can have a seat.
Okay.
Is there a motion regarding Mr. Lawrence's appeal?
I'll enter a motion for the approval subject to random at his expense.
I'll second that.
All those in favor? Motion passes, although I just realized I don't believe we gave any time frame for the random drug screen or how often.
You did not. You probably could.
For you. I'll do another motion.
Okay.
Clear it out. Move for approval of his application pending random drug screens for a year at his expense.
I'll second that.
How often?
That's what I was about to ask.
How often?
Well, the problem with cocaine is it has a relatively short half-life. This is not like marijuana where in 28 days it's still in the system. So I would, if Mr. Fields' office has the resources to call in Mr. Lawrence at his, or order him to have a test done, that's basically what they do with probation on Schedule 2.
To keep it random, his employer's wanting once a month.
We as a company is going to require one at least 12 over the next month, at least once monthly at random, but I need 12 of them over the next year.
And you're going to provide a copy of the results to Mr.
It's
Fields?
my understanding that whatever lab does it faxes that information directly from the lab to Mr. Fields' office without Mr. Lawrence touching it.
So the question is, who triggers for Mr. Lawrence to go in to get a test done?
The employer is saying that he's going to do that.
You are?
Sir?
You would tell him, hey, today you got to go in and take one?
Yeah, or Mr. Fields can, and then Mr. Fields will let us know the results.
I think to dress it up, we probably need to do another motion.
Well, based on what you described, without making a third motion, I think it's okay. I think what we could do is I think our office could accept, we work very well with all of our taxi cab companies. We'll work directly with Mr. Trimble, and I can trigger that request through him, and I can assure you that when I make the request to Mr. Trimble, he'll make the request to Mr. Lawrence the same day. And based on conversations I've had with Mr. Lawrence over a period of the last month, I have absolute confidence he will be there. If he's not, I'll report him immediately to the commission.
And are you empowered if he doesn't show up or if he fails the drug test to pull the permit right then?
I do not. The company has the ability to terminate his arrangement with that company. When they do that, he is then required to come back to our office to ask for a new permit because the permit must have the name of the company on. So, in essence, if the company terminates a driver, the driver has no company until they come in. And I think that goes further. If he doesn't come in within 7 days, then he has to start the process over.
Did we have a ruling or vote on that second motion?
Not yet.
All right. Do we have a second regarding Mr. Jordan's second motion?
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item, we have a request from Khalil Alamari, Christopher Gilbert, and Addis Gibberwatt for a driver permit, driver taxi cab permit.
in making his application, Mr. Alamari neglected to list a 2008 possession of marijuana charge. By your rule, he was denied and presented to you for reapplication. He did fill out his application again and fully disclosed everything that was on his record.
Fellow commissioners, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Alamari?
Mr. Alamari, can you pass a drug test today?
Yes, sir.
Are you willing to submit random drug tests?
Yes, sir.
What company are you going to work for?
Nashville Cab.
Is there a motion regarding Mr. Alamari's request?
I make a motion that we approve his request for.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next, we consider Christopher Gilbert. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Gilbert? Mr. Fields, was Mr. Gilbert requested to appear today?
Yes. I thought he was here.
Is there a motion regarding Mr. Gilbert's application?
Motion to deny. Approval.
Is there a second?
May I ask a question, Mr. Fields, real quickly? When the person doesn't show up, do we typically deny it, or do we defer it, or just
The commission
abeyance?
has actually done it both ways. You have denied, historically over the years, the commission has denied, commission has also deferred.
And why was Mr. Gilbert to be here today?
Mr. Gilbert had a charge in 1991, I think, 91 or 96, where it was a failure to appear. It was he left one thing off of his application.
Any explanation why he's not here?
Unless Lisa knows. We have no explanation.
I'll second the motion that was made.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Last person is Mr. Addis Gilberwat. Am I pronouncing your name, sir?
That's why you're our leader.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. What I was waiting for the chair.
I'm sorry.
We're good. Mr. I'll say Addis. Addis failed to disclose a charge where he failed to appear. Very similar to the last one. Everything else was in order except he failed to include that on his original application. He was denied, and we asked that he reapply.
Transportation Licensing Commission members, in front of you have a letter from the manager of Green Cab saying that they are going to hire Addis pending your approval here today, and he would like to make a brief statement. I'm sorry, what's your name? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm David Ewing, attorney for Addis.
Thank you.
Members of the Taxi Cab Commissioners, I am sorry I failed to report the time I failed to appear in court, which was on my record. I regret this. It is my dream to be a taxi cab driver in Nashville area. I have a letter from the Green Cab stating that they will hire me if I gain the license. they know my background and they are willing to give me a second chance. And I ask each and one of you guys give me a second chance also. Thank you for your time.
What did you fail to appear for?
A drug charge.
And what year was it?
07, sir.
07. What was the disposition of the drug charge?
What happened?
What was the outcome of the case?
I was convicted, sir.
And what was the conviction? I didn't get a chance to read it yet.
I was there to do. I did to serve 5 years in prison.
What was the drug?
Scheduled 1. I think it was ecstasy.
First offense?
Yes, sir.
How much of it did you have?
I believe it was a couple hundred.
Oh.
So you got out, what, about 3 years?
About a year and a half ago, sir.
On parole?
Yeah, I'm currently on parole right now, sir.
You're on parole right now?
Yes, sir.
And he's been tested too, and he's willing to take a test. You've been asking.
Randomly.
And Green Cab's aware that you're on parole right now?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. If you read the letter, they make mention of the probation too.
Yeah, probation.
Mr. Fields, on his application, it states company where you'll be employed allied. Is that an older application?
It's not unusual for an application to be filed and then later amended to a different company. At the point of the issue of the license, that is the point we need to know exactly which company he's working at.
One other question I've got is, why'd you fail to appear for court?
I was living currently in Florida back then, and I didn't know I had to show up, so that's why I couldn't make the traveling arrangement. That's why.
I'd like to keep you an honest man. I make a motion that we pass and that we approve your application for a permit.
Thank you so much.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, members.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is under other passenger vehicles for hire. We've got a request to transfer regarding Roadrunner limo. I believe there's a mistake on the agenda, but it involves Roadrunner limo.
What it should have been listed as an outright purchase of Roadrunner. In order for them to, someone to operate another company, they have to, for someone to purchase one of the companies that has a license, they have to appear in front of the commission to ask permission, and their representative is here.
Thank you, Mr. Fields. Is everything in order with regard to the application?
Everything's in order.
Fellow commissioners, is there a motion regarding the request to purchase Roadrunner limo?
I'd make a motion that we grant the request, sorry.
Do I understand this is Landmark limo's going to be purchased by Roadrunner?
No,
That's the
that
other way
was the
around.
confusion. The Landmark should not have been there.
I'm sorry.
Her family had been involved in that, and somehow or another those folders became merged, and I apologize for that confusion.
I believe there was a second to the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Our motion passes. Next, we have a request from Berlin, Virginia, R.T. Henderson for a driver permit for other passenger vehicle for hire. Mr. Fields?
Ms. Partee applied for a permit. Unfortunately, when she filled out her application, she failed to disclose a charge of being on a revoked driver's license. That would have been in 2004. Other than that, her application was in order.
What about this charge in 2013? 2013, I got a ticket, went to court, and they ended up raising the price. Wasn't working, and I told them I need to do a slow pay. They wouldn't let me do a slow pay. Never got a request in the mail saying that it would be suspended or anything like that. Ended up applying for a job. That's when I found out that it was. Went to take care of that situation, so it just ended up being a ticket for my headlight was out. I do.
Why didn't you disclose the issue from 2004?
I did not remember 2004 until they was telling me about it. It was on my record or whatever. Because once I went to court and everything, I thought it was actually gone. So I didn't even remember, because I would have put it on my application at that time if I had known.
Is there a motion regarding Ms. R.T. Henderson's application?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor? Motion passes.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Next item on our agenda involves horse-drawn carriages. We have a request by Carol Hunt to operate Capital Carriage Company. Mr. Fields.
Ms. Hunt inherited Capital Carriage on the death of her father. Her father had purchased the company from a carriage operator. The rules require that the carriage operators, anytime there's a sale, the permit becomes null, the certificate becomes null, and it has to appear in front of the commission for a new one. Again, I can't speak for her father. Father driven, had no problems with us. There were no issues with him on the street. Thomas Taylor, to my knowledge, was liked by the other companies. Unfortunately, they made an arrangement. And again, I've talked with the owner of the other company. The other company basically said, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done that. When Miss Hunt realized what had happened, she approached us, explained what had happened, and asked to come to the commission. It doesn't affect the number of carriages companies on the street. It's the same company. It's not a new company. It's just an issue. She inherited it from her father without knowing that, and had not been a part of the conversations and the arrangement that he'd made with the owner of Capital Carriage.
Commissioners, does anyone have any questions for Ms. Hunt?
Ma'am, what's your experience operating a carriage?
I based my father with a carriage company for the last, 4 years before he died, and I've been running it since then until this came to light. My husband's been driving for a year with the company, and the other person working with us has been driving for 10 years.
I make a motion that we approve this application.
I second. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Mr. Fields, next we have some complaints against Mr. Matthew Clark, and there's several complainants here. We've got Mr. Brad Kaler, Stacy Romines, Jimmy Ewell, and Michael Stokes. Mr. Fields.
And each one of them filed complaints against Mr. Clark. Two of them are on, as I understand them, are on separate incidents. There's a third that two people have complaints on two different incidents or two different times. The other two have a complaint on the same incident at one time, I think is the way it is. It was again, I think they're going to have to explain, of course, and Mr. Clark is here as well.
Let's hear from Mr. Taylor.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Gary Blackburn, they asked me to appear so that I could try to organize this a little better and have it maybe a little more targeted than just a rambling presentation. So with your permission, I would like to assist with that.
And you were asked to appear by the 4 complainants?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Not by any other entity, just by them as individual
I understand.
drivers. With your permission, could we start with Ms. Romines? Can you state your name for the commission, please?
Yes, it's Stacy Romines.
Mr. Romines, you have made a written complaint to Mr. Fields, and I understand this has to do with behavior you're attributing to Matthew Clark.
Yes, sir.
All right. Just so we'll be oriented here, for what carriage company do you work?
I work for Sugar Creek Carriages.
And for what company does Mr. Clark work?
Hat Creek Carriages.
Now, we've had, and I think the Commission will recall, we've had some, let's say, dissonance between these companies over a period of time. It's been pretty calm this summer. Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
Are you aware of whether Mr. Clark was working during the summer?
He was not.
All right. Why don't you just tell as directly as you can what your specific complaints are about Mr. Clark and when these occurred?
The first instance, I would say, like I said, it was a peaceful summer, and I'd just like to say the other drivers with Hat Creek, we get along very well, very nice to each other, courteous. And when Matthew Clark returned from, I don't know where he was over the summer, but when he returned, I believe it was the first day that he was there. One of the instances was, going down Broadway. We leave the carriage stand there in front of Mike's Ice Cream, go down Broadway to 4th. And I know that things kind of changed today, but for our route, that was set, we're supposed to make that left turn on 4th Avenue. And, I had a bunch of people on my carriage, the long carriage, that seats 9, and I think he had a pretty full load too. And, this is not the first time this has happened, but, he kind of stayed like this, and when I would try to go around, he would come up with his horse. I mean, it was crazy, and then I'd slow down so I could get behind him, and he would slow down. It was like he would not let me over to make that left turn, so I advanced my horse, which is, I asked him to get up to a faster gate, and we did, and made sure there was clearance for me to go around because I knew his intention was to put me off route, and I don't do that. I follow the rules.
Has he cut you off, so to speak, in traffic?
Yes, and that's my other concern is
well, does this endanger
almost
the animal?
every time. It endangers the animal and endangers the people on the carriage because of the back of the carriage coming so close to the horse that you're driving. The back of the carriage is where the tops are. They have, the little bolts and little things that could get caught on the bridle, of the horse you're driving. And it's happened before downtown. And if that bridle gets caught there and the horse, reacts, it'll pull it off. And then you have a horse without a bridle.
And then has he made any obscene gestures to you?
Yes.
When and where?
There's so many times, right there on Broadway, passing me with people with children on my carriage and everything, shooting the bird, to me, and also making comments, about my horse being on, I think the people in his carriage said that he had told them that my horse was on dopamine. And anybody that knows the particular horse I was driving at the time, from what I researched, I didn't even know what dopamine was. Of course, it's not a drug you give animals, but Ringo Starr is a very active horse. He's the total opposite of what a horse would be on any type of sedative, and we do not sedate our animals at all.
So he's telling this to your customers,
yes,
that your horse is on drugs?
Yes.
One of your complaints was that he had blocked you from turning onto 4th Avenue, which would force you out of the route. That's
yes,
the one you just told us
sir.
about. And that he refuses to pull his carriage up at the areas. Are you talking about the stands, carriage stands? Now,
yes,
is there room for a carriage to pull up and another one to pull in behind?
Yes, sir.
All right, so just describe exactly what he's doing.
Well, when there's, nobody, I understand there are times when the parking is full and none of us can pull ahead, which we've been instructed by Metro police officers that if there's not a spot for you to get in, you cannot block 2nd Avenue with your carriage. You must, if you have to just go around in circles, till a spot becomes available. That's what we have to do. And, but when there's, plenty of room to pull up and forward, if it's me, sitting behind him, he'll look back, look forward. He refuses to pull forward to let me out of traffic. He just won't do it.
Is there anything else you need to share with the commission this afternoon?
Just that, the gestures and the things that he does, when I have people in my carriage, I feel very bullied by him. The harassment, and I know some of the things that you may hear today that he's done to other women that, I refuse to go back to where we park our carriages at night by myself. And I never felt that way, at work before. So, I would appreciate y'all's, consideration, and I think he needs to answer and something needs to be done about his actions.
Thank you. The commission, or I suppose the, what would we call him, the respondent? Mr. Clark has any questions, she's pleased to answer. If there are none, thank you. Mr. Kaler. I'll ask you quickly the same questions. Your name is Brad Kaler?
Yes, sir.
Is that Kaylor?
Yes.
And you work for Sugar Creek?
Yes, I do.
You know Mr. Matthew Clark?
Yes, I do.
All right. What are your problems you are having, if any, with Mr. Clark?
Basically, unprofessionalism, constantly giving me the finger at one point or another, cutting me off, coming too close to my carriage, actually to the front of my horse when he cuts in front of me. Doesn't basically leave me enough room, like Stacy explained, the back of the carriage could catch on the horse's bridle.
Has he called you names?
Yes, he has, and I do not want to repeat those.
Well, are these obscene names?
Yes, sir.
And did you have customers in your carriage?
Yeah, several times, yes.
Is this on Broadway?
Yes, it is.
There are a lot of people there and hearing earshot?
Oh, yeah.
Has you had some difficulty with him pulling his carriage forward so that you can pull in behind his carriage?
All the time. I could count on it every time.
Does that cause any disruption of traffic or inconvenience to motorists?
Yeah, because it leaves my carriage out in the traffic lane of Broadway there.
All right. This summer, when he was not working, did you have any difficulties with any other driver from any other company?
No, I did not. Actually, it was a good summer.
All right. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the commissioners?
Every time Matthew Clark is down there, things seem to go awry. He seems like, he wants to bully everybody. When he's not there, everything goes pretty smooth. Yeah, there's going to be friendly banter, competition, just like all the other storefronts downtown. This constant safety thing, cutting me off, not pulling up. He'll go through an intersection, trotting his horse, and then slow down, catching me in the intersection, which is a huge safety thing. I have no other choice than to go around him and advance my horse a little bit more to get out of that situation. And within this past week, towards the end of last week, he actually walking by my carriage. I did not even look at him. I just happened to look over, and he's holding his hand down to his side, flipping me the bird. So all this is, something, in my opinion, needs to be done about this. Because when he's not around, everything's smooth.
Thank you. If the commissioners and Mr. Clark have any questions, he's prepared to respond.
I have a question for Mr. Fields. Do have the inspectors here today to report on any of this?
They were not available, or they weren't there for any of these incidents.
One other question. What time frame are we talking about?
As far as when he did this last time, or, we can't be on the street till 6 o'clock. I would say it was not knowing exact time, probably
No, I mean weeks, days, a month ago, a week ago.
Oh, that Matthew Clark's been doing this?
Yeah.
I started driving as a carriage driver this past March, and it's been ongoing. Ever since I started, I've had problems with him. Never done anything to him. I'm just down here trying to make a buck like everybody else is. And I'm the type, I'm going to stand my ground for things, and I'm not going to let you bully me. That's the way I was raised, so.
I believe the formal complaint, what I have indicates it was sent to Mr. Fields on September the 15th. At least that's the date of the complaint.
Because I was understanding there were no problems this summer, so.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I pronounce this right, Mr. Yule? Did I say that right? Yule.
Yes, sir.
This is Mr. Jimmy Yule. Why don't you spell that for their record?
UHL.
UHL. Well, they put a Y here on this. That's what caught me. You work for Sugar Creek?
Yes, sir.
How long have you worked for Sugar Creek?
About 4.5 months.
Okay. Now, did you work during the summer?
Just a little while there. I was in training toward the end of summer.
End of summer. And you have a specific complaint about Mr. Clark and his operation of his carriage. Can you describe that to the commissioners?
He's operating very unsafe. He's, like everybody's saying, he's cutting you off. He pulls up in the 4th intersection, and it's a quick red light anyways. It goes red real fast, and he'll pull out there and he'll stop right in front of you, right in the middle of the intersection, and then he'll take off again. You barely got time to get on through there.
Has he operated what you consider to be an unsafe speed?
Yes, sir. He's always trotting that horse just everywhere he goes.
Now, how does a horse usually, what sort of gait does a horse usually have that you consider safe?
Just normal and not
like a walk?
Yeah, just a walk, not a trot, but he's got him going in a fast pace.
All right. And has he come close to striking one of your horses with his carriage?
Yes, sir, but he come in and cut back too quick, and I even had to pull the horse's head over to the right real quick to get him to not hang the harness and bridle.
Has he made any obscene gestures to you?
The only thing he's done is use the middle finger on several occasions.
Were there members of the public present?
Yes, sir. I had customers on my carriage. He also had customers on his, and as he was passing us at that time, his customers was making accusations about what he had done. So like, why would he be doing stuff like this?
You mean his customers
they was
were
talking complaining about him? Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Is there anything else that you think you need to share with the commissioners?
Not at this moment, other than him being he's real unsafe, and it's not, he just don't really need to be out there. He's going to end up hurting or killing somebody.
Complaint was made September the 15th. When did you start working full time? When you got through with your probationary period or your training period? Do you remember that?
Oh, I was in training the last week of May, started the 1st of June.
Okay.
That's when I started working with Sugar Creek Carriage.
All right. Do you know how long before September 15 it was when these incidents occurred? Late summer?
Yeah, it was late summer. It was after he came back. I was there for about a month, I think, before he came back.
All right. Thank you. Anyone have questions? And then Mr. Stokes. I'll ask you the same questions I've asked the others, Mr. Stokes. You work for Sugar Creek?
I do, yes,
And
sir.
you're a carriage operator?
Yes, sir.
And you're familiar with Matthew Clark?
I am.
And I think you witnessed the incident that Mr. Yule was describing?
Yes, sir.
Can you just tell the commissioners what you observed yourself?
Well, I pull into the back of the carriage stand, and as you know, there's a lot of carriages out there on Broadway. I heard you talking about congestion and stuff like that. So as a, professional courtesy, we always try to be vigilant and pulling up, keeping that rotation moved forward to get as many carriages into the stand as possible. A customer got onto a carriage in front of Jimmy's and pulled out, and at the same time, Jimmy was also getting riders onto his. So he finished loading his carriage up. In the meantime, Matthew is yelling up for him to pull up, just yelling out loudly, unnecessarily loud. So he finally pulls up to finish filling out his log before he pulls out, but he did make room for Matthew before, he didn't take any more of his time than was absolutely necessary. He goes out on his ride. Matthew sits there at the carriage stand, 5-7 minutes later. He gets a ride. He pulls out. I pull up to the front of the carriage stand. By then, carriages were already coming back into rotation, which forced me to the front. I had not got a customer at the time, so I was still there when they came out of third and was heading down to the river. By this time, Matthew had caught Jimmy and was right on his rear of the carriage. By the time they crossed through 2nd Avenue, Matthew came out into the left lane, trotted his horse, cut back into in front of Jimmy, and this was, by the time he went in front of Jimmy, they were in the middle of the intersection, which he had to whoa his horse in the middle of the intersection in order to keep the nose of his horse from getting caught by the bridle there. And the reason why he did this is because when he came by, he could see that the carriage stand was full, and it could hold one more carriage. If he made it down there around Riverfront and back to the carriage, he would be there and would force Jimmy to go to another location. And it was an unfair advantage that he put himself into. Not only that, but endangered the horse.
Trying to picture that. You mean he operated his carriage with the horse fast enough to overtake Jimmy?
Yes,
to pass him and cut in front of him?
Yes, and so instead of controlling his horse and keeping his horse back from the carriage and just focusing on his tour, he purposely trotted his horse around to take that unfair advantage.
Is there anything else that you would like to share with the commissioners?
I've been doing this since March, which isn't near as long as some of the older drivers here. And when I came into this business, it was very clear that there were some issues from the past. And right off the bat, I was really excited for this job. It was fun. Was making money. It was exciting, but he from the very first time, he always made his presence known out there driving. Like, he would cut you off or just stop in the middle of his tour, going down the road. It's just unnecessary actions that he does just to kind of smite and disturb the atmosphere out there.
During the summer, when Mr. Clark was not working, did you have any difficulties with any other drivers?
No, actually, by then, we had established, a little bit more flow of things. As far as we had a manager come up that took charge, we got a consistent ranch hand. Things started picking up to where we were able to get more used to things, and it started settling down a lot out there, we really found that our experience out there was fun. It really was. I mean, even with the other competition out there, we didn't, not drinking buddies or anything like that, but we definitely weren't rude or anything to each other, and it was fun. The whole summer was.
At the present time, are you having difficulties with any other driver from any other company aside from Mr. Clark?
No, not that I can think of. Nobody stands out.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions? He's glad to answer.
Are you having any difficulties with Mr. Clark?
Yes. For example, I wasn't clear, I guess, but he would definitely stop in his route. Just for example, if we're going down 4th Avenue, we'll pass the Shimmerhorn. Instead of narrating as you're driving, he'll come to a complete stop when another carriage is behind you. He'll try to catch you because when he drives looking back. like this. So he's able to watch me. And if I'm looking out, like here, over on the left is the Schermerhorn Symphony Center, and I'll go to tell facts and things about that. At that moment, when I take my eyes off, he'll whoa his horse right there, just try to make that collision, or things like that. It's not a red light, it's not a stop sign, no pedestrians crossing, there's no reason to stop the horse, or he'll try to cut you off, slow down intentionally to, obstruct you.
Are you supposed to drive facing backwards?
No, you're not.
Are you trained not to do that?
Yes. From my experience, everything is a learning experience, and every horse is different. And you can never know exactly what that horse is going to do. You can drive the horse every day for the summer, and something pops off over there that horse has never seen before and spook. And if you're not there to react exactly when that horse is reacting, you can have a situation.
Okay. Unless there's questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I think that's their presentation. I would, and of course, Mr. Clark, I'm sure, is entitled to speak and defend himself. I would remind the commission that my first real involvement here had to do with this ongoing warfare among these carriage companies. And for many reasons, in part, I think because it was one of these hearings in which you found that the charges should be dismissed, and also because of the good work of Mr. Fields and some meetings that we've had, there's been a great spirit of cooperation. But one name that is consistent in all of those complaints back through the past was Matthew Clark. When Matthew Clark is not present, we have finally restored some peace. And when he's present, there's not. I'm not suggesting that his livelihood should be deprived of him or there's some draconian penalty, but I think it's in the interest not only of the welfare of these carriage operators and these individual drivers, but of the public at large, that we not have such behavior on a street as busy as, presently as busy as Lower Broad. Apparently it's going to be even a broader area here. Maybe they'll be out of bird sight before long, but at least we can do something about one person who's creating issues.
What kind of remedy would you want to have here?
I think if there were I think there needs to be an actual penalty that he can experience. If he were suspended for a month and then placed on probation, I would hope that would be a sufficient remedy. I know in the past, I've looked, before I started this, I looked at some other penalties that had been imposed in the past, and that seems to be, it seems to have been a common penalty imposed by the commission in years past.
Thank you. Is Mr. Matthew Clark present?
He was present. The owner of Hat Creek, Sam Roberts, is here.
I have to apologize for Mr. Clark. He was present here.
I thought I did. Oh, then I guess it was. I apologize.
He has a company. It's called Stockman Supply, that carries him in different directions in the state of Tennessee. Early this morning, he had to go to Ripley, Tennessee. He was trying to get back in time for this, and apparently he's failed to.
I'm sorry, what's your name?
Sam Roberts. I'm the owner of Hat Creek. I suggest that we either postpone it, or I do have quite a bit that I need to say myself.
We have some people also requesting to speak. I don't know who they are, but Sarah Beth Williams, Peggy Sisk, and Austin Farmer. Are they on behalf of Matthew Clark?
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Sisk, I do know, she had some information that didn't relate to these things, and I had anticipated Mr. Clark would testify, and then she would, I would ask him about that, and she could be in rebuttal, but she is here.
That's not part of the complaint today, I don't believe.
That's why I didn't call her in chief, but neither is a postponement part of our proceeding today.
May I say what I need to say, and maybe we can make a decision on
You go ahead, sir.
If you remember the last time we were here, Mr. Smith received citations from the Transportation License Commission, and in order to revolve his way around that, he involved us, using these same excuses, these same complaints. It's getting to be a broken record. Nobody's perfect down there. Sometimes you might pull out in front of somebody, not intentionally. They've done it. But we don't look at it as being an intentional act. On this particular incident, on October 5th, Mr. Smith received some citations from the police department. What is the date that they made these complaints?
September 15th.
Right after Mr. Smith gets these other citations, simply to drag us right back in here again. One other thing, folks, you might want to really look at is he's got 4 drivers. They all have cell phones. They all can take pictures, and not one picture is here. Not one piece of evidence is here other than the word of mouth. Excuse me. You're lying. Do you have any pictures, sir?
Excuse me, sir. Sir, if I may speak. We have one person at the podium right now, and only he can speak. If you speak out of line, I'm going to ask you to leave. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. But there is not one bit of evidence. Why? Because the kind of things they're talking about do happen to different people down there. Simply because in the past months, we've all been bottled up at one place. I was truly hoping that we could get this opened up down there before it come to this again. I notice they bring up a lot about not pulling up and having to be in the street. Well, when you've got 14, 15 carriages down there, these citations were for blocking the street, the roadway. Nobody's perfect. Matthew is a good man, and he works hard. He does a good job for me. On October 5th, I would like to present this to the board. That's the number of rides that Mr. Clark done that day in 8 hours, from 1 p.m. to 9 p.m. What time would he have to do anything else?
Why is October 5th relevant?
October 5th is the day that Mr. Smith was given the citation. October 5th has a lot to do with the complaints they got allegedly that Mr. Clark done. You're not going to do that in 8 hours and spend time bullying somebody, spend time cutting people off, Although I will agree, this particular horse does have a long gait. He's a black Percheron. He's long-legged. He weighs about 1,750 pounds. And he don't walk slow, but it's his natural gait walk. He's not in a trot. And even the horse himself, if he comes up behind a carriage or a car, you have to carefully guide him or he'll try to just go around it. He's an excellent horse. He just has a long gait and he strives.
So you're blaming the horse for all of
No,
this?
no, ma'am, I am not. I'm simply saying, I believe one of their complaints was the number of times he come around them.
Is the horse Toby?
Toby, yes. The horse is Toby. It just appears to me that each time that Sugar Creek is disciplined some way between the Transportation License Commission or the police, he pulls us in here. It's repeating itself. I'm not saying that sometimes something will happen. Like, well, the one driver made the statement that there at 4th Avenue where you pull up, there's an error there. And a lot of times the error is so short-lived, maybe 8 seconds at the maximum, that you will pull up into the intersection before the error turns so that you can get turned in there and get across the intersection. A lot of times, if you don't, there ain't but one carriage can get across there before the green light changes on the oncoming traffic. If you ease up and stop and turn, it actually gives the carriage behind you an opportunity to turn also in the second or the outside lane. So he won't be stuck in the intersection. It's not that they're just trying to hold somebody back. The fact of the matter is, I've seen several of them do that where they would allow them to turn into that second lane.
September 5th of this year, 2013, were you down at Broadway?
I'm sorry, sir.
On September 5th of 2013, were
You mean
down at
October
Broadway?
5th?
No, September 5th. I mean September 5th, Thursday night, were you down at Broadway when the horse was down there with Mr. Clark?
I can't say that I was, sir. I could have been, but I go down and I check on my horses and I check on my drivers, see if they need anything.
On the following
at
Saturday?
random times.
On Saturday the 14th, were you down there?
I usually do go down on Saturday, yes, sir.
Okay.
I usually do. On a long day like Saturday and Sunday.
And when you knew of these complaints that were being made, what have you done to go down and see whether there was any veracity to the complaints?
I haven't,
on your driver, so to speak.
I haven't even read the complaint other than I talked to Mr. Clark. I talked to Matthew Clark about it. And he says he's doing nothing any different to them or anyone else, not even my own drivers, that he goes down there to work, as you can see the number of rides that he gets. And he does that in 8 hours.
Mr. Fields, do we have clear notice to Mr. Clark that he was to be here today?
He originally was supposed to be here at the October meeting. He had called the day of or the day before, I think, and said that he had to, it sounded very similar to what may have happened this morning, said that he had to actually leave the state to deliver a horse or a colt. Anyway, had to make a delivery and asked if we could defer it to the November meeting. So I confirmed the November meeting, then we sent him a letter to be here in November. And frankly, I thought I saw him, and obviously I was mistaken when the meeting started.
Mr. Stone, is does Metro Code or our rules provide for any standards of conduct for drivers or carriage drivers?
Yes, there is a section 1254-200 that lists conduct of drivers, and there's 15 items listed. I can read them all to you. The ones that struck me as potentially being implicated by the testimony include acting in a reasonable, prudent, and courteous manner, observe and obey all traffic laws and regulations of Metro and state. And there's another one that I noticed, not permit the speed at which any horse-drawn carriage is driven to exceed a trot. So apparently a trot is actually acceptable. But I do not know, obviously it incorporates all the rules of the road, of the Metro Code, and the Tennessee Code annotated. I'm not specifically certain to what extent some of the conduct described would violate provisions of those laws, but Mr. Blackburn can perhaps speak to that. Perhaps he's researched it.
Are there any sanctions listed in this particular section?
There is, for violations of any provision of Chapter 1254, the punishments that, or discipline that a holder of a driver permit can receive include suspension of not for a period more than 30 days or revocation. The usual process that's actually contemplated is for the director to be able to implement that discipline, and then the driver can then appeal to the commission. But in this case, I think Mr. Fields was not comfortable with that since the witnesses were not his inspectors. And so I thought you all could hear it. The discipline of probation appears to only be available to a certificate holder of a certificate of public necessity and convenience rather than a driver. The driver permit section only speaks to suspension for 30 days or less or revocation.
Thank you, sir. Do the commissioners have any other questions of the witnesses before we close to go into deliberations?
I just want to say a couple things. Mr. Blackburn, you have not helped us any in that your entire witness process is one company, and we know there's a history between these two companies. Now, I'm not disputing anything anybody said. I'm just pointing that out. I understand. But how many companies are downtown right now?
I was going to say 6 companies.
So now we have 2. And I'm not discounting anybody's statements or anything that's going on. All I'm saying is this seems to be a consistent theme back and forth between these 2 companies. Now, for transparency purposes, I live and work downtown. I see you guys every day. And I see stuff go on every day from every single company that could be a violation at some point in time. Every single day. None of us get paid to be up here. And the last thing I want to do is to have to go out on the street every night and police this to go, what the hell is going on here? This is ridiculous. All we care about, I'm in the tourism industry, Ms. Marco's in the tourism industry, all we care about is are the people in your rides having a good time in our town? Because that's what you do. This other stuff is garbage. And I don't understand why we have to keep coming back to this every 6 months. Why can't you police yourselves? Why are these 2 companies so hateful of each other that this goes on? That's my question. Can anybody answer that for me?
Answer that. They have policed themselves. They've done it very well. We're here talking about one person.
But you haven't brought anybody else to the table. When you have one other company.
All I have is unrebutted testimony.
Well, what you have is he said, she said. You have a he said, she said. We don't have any.
There is no she said here. Don't you see that? There is no response.
In your estimation, sir. There's no response because he's not here. I understand that. But you know the history like I do, sir.
I do, and I know it's a lot better except for Matthew Clark. Now, what I would ask you, Mr. Commissioner, is exactly what is the evidence specifically that rebuts a single syllable said by these witnesses?
I didn't say
there is none.
I made perfectly clear that I'm not rebutting anything they're saying. I'm saying
Then
you're not
he's
making
guilty.
our job any easier by not bringing us more than one company that we know we have issues back and forth between the two. That was my statement.
Well, but see, then what you're doing is you're questioning credibility, having already said you don't doubt their credibility. Don't you see that? That is absurd, respectfully. You can't say, I accept their testimony is true, but then I reject it because it might not be true, and there might be some reason not to,
I'm not
some reason to doubt
accepting
them.
or rejecting, sir. I'm making a statement.
Well, you're making a statement having to do with the outcome of something that's important that has nothing to do with what we're here to do. Now, if you want us to agree, you want me to agree that these people need to grow up down there in Lower Broad, Lord knows, I've been there. You know, the hearing on these charges made against Mr. Smith, as you recall, were heard here and dismissed. Now, at that time, we had charges we could have preferred. We chose not to do that day. We had a lawsuit ready to file. Actually had it typed. In fact, I may have predicted that we were going to do it, but we didn't do it. And we didn't do it because of two reasons. One is that action sort of lanced the wound to a degree. And then secondly, we were having some meetings with Mr. Field, and we anticipated that some things, functional, practical things, such as you have now accomplished, were going to be done so that we could free this up. In fact, the last time I was here was probably whenever it was discussed this was going before the council, we were here and we talked about what a great thing this would be, relieving this pressure down there which causes some of these problems. These problems are especially going to be exacerbated if we have people who are out of control, if we have people who cannot control themselves, if we have someone who will not conduct himself as a gentleman and a professional, then we're going to have this kind of thing. And what you're saying is, unless we bring in people from various companies and make this a company dispute, then there's nothing we can do. What we've talked about here has to do with safety to animals. It has to do, therefore, with safety to the people who are riding. It has to do with conduct that should not be tolerated to happen in front of these people, tourists, I presume. We're talking about letting one person adversely affect the image of the city and of the carriage industry in that location. And he has twice failed to appear.
Mr. Blackburn, I don't want to cut you off, but
Please do.
I would like to make a recommendation to my commissioners. We have an obligation as a commission not to act in an arbitrary fashion. And so I'm a bit concerned that Mr. Clark is not here, given that he was given plenty of due process to appear and defend himself. We've got testimony from 4 witnesses, other than the fact that they are also carriage drivers. There appears not to be a reason to doubt their testimony. And because Mr. Clark is not here, I would recommend that we suspend Mr. Clark for 30 days. And as the decision regarding the complaints against Mr. Clark, I don't get to vote or even make a motion, but that's what I would recommend, given that he is not here to challenge any of the assertions. And I believe if he believed that they were wrong or incorrect, he would have made every effort to be here to defend himself. But he's not here.
I'd like to say something before we continue, and I agree with what you're saying, and I would definitely I agree with what you're saying, but can you stand up here for just a minute? Not you, Mr. Blackburn. I've been on this commission for well over a year, and this is not the first time that this issue has come up.
Correct.
And as Commissioner Wallen said before, we are both members of the hospitality community, so this is very important to us, what's going on downtown. I can't say that what the witnesses here today said is absolutely true. I wasn't there to see it. I can't say what Matthew is doing is absolutely true. I wasn't there to see it. I'm appealing to you as a business owner. Someone who owns a business, you're in the hospitality business,
Correct.
as you provide a service for the tourism, for
Yes,
tourists that come into the city. I also am a business owner, and I employ a lot of employees. If I were to continually hear the same stories from different people, I would have to stand back for a moment and say, perhaps some of these are true, and what can I do about it? And I'm not saying to fire this man. I'm saying to reel him in a little bit. To say, there's a lot of smoke going on here. There's got to be a couple of sparks. There may be a fire. Why don't we stop it right now? Because you're the one who's in control here, the way I see it.
Yes, ma'am. I understand that. And let me say that anytime I hire anyone, I have a set of rules that I give them. Important rules, such as not cutting over in front of a carriage or even a motor vehicle. Not cutting them off in no way. Pulling up. When a carriage pulls out in front of them, they automatically pull up. Several safety rules. Never leave the horse by itself. Not to go to the bathroom facility or wherever unless somebody is there with that horse. Just several different rules.
I believe that you have a set of rules, and I respect your set of rules, and I know that they are for the safety of the city and your animals and your drivers and other drivers and your passengers.
Correct.
I believe that. What I'm saying here is not all of the rules are always followed. Not always.
They do apply, but they are not always followed. I'll
agree. We agree. So there's a lot of smoke going on here. A lot of people are complaining about that. I've heard flipping the bird 1,000 times over the past 6 months. Excuse me. I've heard that from so many people, not all of them here today, and not only two companies, but over the past 6 months, over the last year, I've heard so much of that. Can you for a moment believe that maybe this is happening?
As much as I've been down there, ma'am, I have never seen Mr. Clark do that.
I'm sure no one would do it in front of you, just as my employees wouldn't do it in front of me.
A lot of times I'm just driving around. They don't even know I'm there.
Can we just assume that perhaps this is happening and perhaps you can just take one step back and maybe have a conversation and say, if this is happening, we need to stop it right now?
I have actually called a meeting of all of my employees.
I'm not worried about all of your employees today. I'm
and advise them to follow them rules. No bullying stuff to go on, no harassing whatsoever. Pull up when there's... The 90% of the problems that we have down there is the fact of pulling up. Now, I want to thank Mr. Fields here for putting those other 3 carriage slips on the other side of the road. And Mr. Smith's drivers, they've even recognized it, and we've recognized it, and Southern Comfort recognized it. And now we will pull in one of those slips and wait until somebody else pulls out on the other side to go over there to keep anybody from getting in the road and getting cited.
Sir, apparently this isn't happening, and I understand what your rules are, but apparently it's not happening all of the time. My concern is that the only thing we can do is to suspend a license for 30 days.
Or less. Any period of time less.
Or less. I'm ready.
I have one real quick question. What's our standard of proof here?
I mean,
Is it clear and convincing by preponderance of the evidence?
I think it would be preponderance of the evidence. Lack of another, but there's nothing specified, so
Okay.
it's a civil charge.
Commission, most of the authority, or most of the initial authority for things such as this belongs to the director, or is it with the, at least, and it talks about things if he determines or if she determines. The challenge that I have is if I see it, or if I have a police officer or an inspector share it, then I can determine that there's clearly that there's no ulterior motive, there's no extra action that's going on. I'm making the assumption that I have a professional that's doing a professional job. So again, for the director, I can say it's about me, about if I were determining. Now, again, I'm not sure about the evidence as it goes up to the commission.
I mean, witness testimony is evidence, just the same as like photographs or video. It can be considered to be evidence. It's up to the trier of fact, which in this case would be the commission, to determine how credible they believe it to be.
I have something to say, and I think it would make a big difference in your decision, and I would really like to speak. Because this involves my safety too.
If you'd
And I have
approach the
proof here.
podium, ma'am, and introduce yourself.
My name is Sarah Beth Williams with Cumberland Carriage Tours. I really appreciate the fact that you're letting me speak after hopefully you all haven't made a decision. I think that you need to rethink this 30-day probation thing because I have 2 police reports here within a week or 2 weeks on the 12th, and these go back. These aren't just from March. These go back from October 2012. And I have been harassed by Matthew Clark, too. Now, on Labor Day weekend, on October 12th, Matthew Clark.
Ma'am, I'm sorry you have not filed a complaint with the commission with respect to these charges, so I'm going to have
Well, this is related to it.
I understand.
He's not on notice.
But he is not.
Claiming against him, so he's not able to have the opportunity to appear and defend himself.
So can I back up the fact that he has stopped his horse in front of my carriage in a full trot and almost hurt my horses?
You will have to file a complaint at a future date, and Mr. Fields can then set it for a commission meeting, and then Mr. Clark can be notified that he'll have the opportunity to appear and defend himself.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. I was under the...
Please?
If I could finish my sentence.
Okay.
I was under the impression you had evidence in support of what the other witnesses had already testified to.
I just came because this has happened to me, and I've been followed back to my lot, and Mr. Roberts was with him. And he said that his testimony said that he doesn't know anything about what's going on. He was under Jefferson Street Bridge.
You are more than welcome to file a formal complaint with the commission, and then we'll give notice to Mr. Clark regarding your complaint so he has an opportunity to be here.
Okay. Thank you.
I think the commission should not regard Ms. Williams' remarks in making the decision.
I'm sorry, sir. That's a very good recommendation, Ms. Costonis. The commissioners should not take into consideration. I'm sorry, ma'am. Your name?
Sarah Beth Williams.
Ms. Williams' remarks regarding her new complaint against Mr. Clark concerning the deliberations we're making today about the complaints from Mr. Kaler, Ms. Romines, Mr. Ewell, and Mr. Stokes. Sir, you wanted to add something?
I was just going to say, if those reports you made out, if you would bring the report, you would see that the deposition on the report says unfounded.
At this point, we're going to close the complaint proof process, and unless you have something else to add.
Well, I think I've taken enough of your time. I would point out that in response to the question Mr. Roberts was asked about paying attention to the safety of his drivers, he also has previously admitted he didn't even look at these complaints against Mr. Clark. I think it perhaps is a systemic problem with The only thing I would point out is I do agree that the burden would be preponderance of the evidence. I don't know what other burden there could be. It's a civil matter. It's a civil hearing. If it were appealed, it'd be appealed according to the announcement that's made before every meeting to the Chancery Court. I have complained in times past that these witnesses ought to be under oath, but that's not really an issue today. I still think that's true, by the way. But be that as it may, what we have are a set of accusations that are sufficient, if believed, to justify the punishment for the well-being of the public. We have no contrary evidence, and nothing Mr. Roberts has said rebuts any single point that was made by any of these witnesses. These matters in every courtroom in this state are proved. You'd have to reject every bit of this evidence to say it was not proved. That in fact, would be, respectfully, would be arbitrary. I think we're not talking about some draconian penalty. We're talking about what is presented here, and maybe this will kind of finally rein in Mr. Clark, and Mr. Roberts will be better encouraged to have control over these things, and things will be better. Finally, an innocent man doesn't waste two opportunities to demonstrate his innocence.
I want to correct one thing I said earlier. I responded abruptly to your question and just realized that I misspoke. The standard of evidence for a commission is actually even lower than preponderance of an evidence. Your obligation is you have to find more than a scintilla of evidence supporting your findings under the Leonard Plating case, and your actions cannot be arbitrary and capricious. And if you meet that standard, you will not be overturned on appeal.
Thank you for that clarification. And while I understand a lot of the I'm frankly frustrated that there is a lot of animosity between these two carriage companies. But I think, given what we've heard today, I don't want the commission at all to. I feel like it's obligated to follow the proof, given what we've heard today, and based on that, determined that Mr. Clark has in fact failed to uphold the standards of conduct that's required by the Transportation Licensing Commission rules. Would anybody like to make a motion or further deliberate?
If I may, I want to make sure that I'm clear on what your particular actions could be. One is find nothing. 2 would be to suspend for up to 30 days, and 3 would be revocation. So those are basically the 3 things you could do. Or suspend less than 30, anything 30 days or less.
It seems to me that perhaps 2 findings are called for. One would be a finding that any provision of Chapter 1254, including the items from Chapter 1250 or Section 1254-200 that I referenced earlier, were in fact violated. If you find that a violation occurred, then you can impose discipline, suspension up to 30 days, or you can revoke his driver's permit. But it's only disciplinary action on the driver's permit that appears to be before us.
I'd like to make a comment about the proof so far. It sounds like that the standard of proof is clear and convincing, which is just basically, or scintilla.
It's quite low.
But still, it would seem it would have to be 5149 at a minimum. And what I've seen so far is 4 witnesses that come forward, and yes, they can be impeached by bias. The rules of evidence clearly provide that bias can be a form of impeachment going to the character of the witness's testimony. And I have not been around for the history between Hat Creek and Sugar Creek, but it's clear from what's been commented here that there's been some previous history between the parties that may be considered in their credibility. But there was also a witness, the last one, who corroborated one of the other witnesses as a witness to the incident occurring. And otherwise, I didn't see any impeachment of their test or of their statements here today. Mr. Clark's had 2 opportunities to be here. He's declined a second time to be here, and I would agree with what was said that if my authorization to operate on the streets was at jeopardy, I'd be here, certainly on the second time. I would say that, and I apologize, I forgot your last name, but his employer's here, and I could say that he was offering testimony as a character witness for Mr. Clark. But weighing everything that I saw, it would have to weigh in favor of the complainants. And I would make a motion to find that there was a violation of 1254, is that .200, particularly that Mr. Clark had acted in ways that were unbecoming of a carriage driver, put horses and other people in jeopardy.
The reasonable, prudent, and courteous manner is one provision.
Yeah, I would quote it exactly.
I don't know if this occurred, but not operate, obey and observe all traffic laws and regulations of Metro and the state.
I would find there was a violation of reasonable, prudent behavior. Is that correct? Or do I have it said?
Reasonable, prudent, and courteous.
Okay. And courteous. That would be my motion on the first part.
Do you recommend a penalty or a fine or anything?
That was going to be a two-part. Okay. First, find that there is a violation, and then
I understand. Is there a second?
There's a second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Yeah.
Nay? Any nays?
Notice of the charges and had the opportunity.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We just had a point we were trying to make sure before you vote it was okay.
We were confident that Mr. Clark is going to notice of the charges today and that he has had the opportunity to come here and defend himself even though he did not appear. So I think you can proceed.
Is there a motion regarding potential penalty for failing to meet the standards required of carriage drivers?
Make a motion for said offense, carry a penalty of 30 days, suspended license.
This is permanent. It's 30 days suspension is permanent.
Okay. Suspension of his permit, 30-day suspension of his permit.
That's immediately or at a specific time?
Immediate.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. The last item on the agenda, Mr. Fields, is I believe you've presented to the commission a draft schedule for next year's meetings.
Historically, the commission meets, or the last several years historically, not true. The commission's met on the fourth Thursday of the month. There are a couple of dates next year that I would ask you to reconsider, one being in June. I would like to be out of the country at the end of June. If you would allow me, I'll try to come back. And then we would change the date in September to the 18th to avoid Rosh Hashanah. Then November and December will both be a week early to avoid Thanksgiving and Christmas. The other two issues that you're required to deal with on an annual basis is to establish a time to have the annual meeting for taxi cab permits and the annual meeting to consider emergency wrecker zones. I will tell you, historically, the meeting for emergency wreckers has been in June. The annual meeting for taxi cab permit consideration has been in November. The last couple of years, we have kept our schedule as it relates to emergency wrecker zones as having it in June, although it may sometimes have to bleed over depending on what those issues are. We have had a unique set of issues and opportunities since y'all allowed me to come back about 20 months ago to, maybe not that many, 18 months ago, to with respect to taxi cabs. In one year, you had 3 or 4 different opportunities and meetings to discuss it. Last year, we discussed on 2, or during this year, we've discussed it on, I think, 2 different occasions in January and then again in April with the issue, January being the annual meeting, April being a meeting to discuss ADA cabs. We presently have 3 active applications for additional permits today. In other words, they didn't, I said, I don't know when the meeting is. They said, we don't care when the meeting is. The quicker the better. And I'm using their words, not my words. So, again, I wanted to share that information with you. Again, last year, your annual meeting for taxi cabs was in January, and then a special meeting later in the year. So I just need direction on when you would like to have the next meeting to discuss taxi cab permits and the agreement in June for the wrecker, if that still fits.
I have only one conflict with the dates that you proposed here. That's February 27th. I'll be in Kentucky at a trial. I know we like to stick to the fourth Thursday, but if it's possible, could we go the week before?
We can, the only issue that we have is since we don't manage this space, I can't guarantee space. Typically, they accommodate us if they can. So whatever schedule that you propose today, tomorrow, or Monday, I will send it to the state trial courts and ask permission to go ahead and schedule the meetings that day.
I would just ask February 20th then. Thanks.
And we'll just, again, this is my suggestion. I'd like for you to actually take action on it. Again, I do have 3 active permits or 3 applications. I would like to have direction on when you would have that next meeting on taxi cabs.
If we did one this year, could we cancel the one for next year, the public hearing?
If you were to have one this year, well, we're in November and December.
We've already had multiple this year.
Right. It'd actually be a special meeting. We would still be required to have one next year. Okay. If you were to have one at the end of this year, it would. You had one at the first of last year, was January. If you were to take action next month, I would probably recommend that we do not have an annual, that the annual meeting would be next November, go back to our regular schedule, and then stay, that the future would be the June, November. And that was actually done for staff. I mean, to be very honest with you, when we established that way back, it was done to keep those 2 big events, because those are the 2, from a staff investigation standpoint, those are the 2 biggest things we do.
Are we
scheduled next month? Yeah.
Do we have a meeting next month?
You have a meeting scheduled on December the 12th. Typically, we do not have, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, it is December 12th. Typically, we do not hold that meeting unless there's an issue that only you can resolve. But it is on your schedule, and this room is scheduled.
I would like the taxi cab permit meeting to be in January, only because I will not be able to attend a December meeting.
I move that we call one special taxi cab meeting in our January meeting.
Yeah, I think it should be called the annual meeting, yes. I agree. That way, we're not required to have.
I withdraw my motion.
Another one.
Can I read you what the provisions of the rule say? It says the Metropolitan Transportation Licensing Commission shall fix a time and place for public hearing to be held annually to review applications from current certificate holders for additional taxi cab permits. And then it says the Metropolitan Transportation Licensing Commission may, in its discretion, call special meetings in addition to the annual meeting for the consideration of applications for new taxi cab permits.
It doesn't say anything regarding date, meaning if I called the public hearing for taxi cabs in January, that is the annual meeting then?
It does not.
Okay.
Right. The only requirements we have is notifications.
And Rochelle is suggesting, and I agree, that it would be fine for you guys to specify that your annual meeting for additional permits for existing companies and the special meeting for new applications for certificates could occur on the same day.
Okay.
And the only, with the notification issue, it has to be published in the newspaper no more than 3 days prior to the meeting, no more than 5 days prior to the meeting, 3 days, at a minimum of 3.
And that applies to both annual and special meetings.
So if you held them, so you could hold an annual meeting and a special meeting at the same time, because what we've got is a current permit holder that has made a request, and there would be 2 new companies, so you'd have to hold them at the same, you could hold them at the same time.
That would be our, in effect, annual meeting.
Right. You don't have, but you're not required to hold them both at the same time.
Right.
It's just you could.
I'd like to make a motion. I would move that we hold our annual public taxi cab hearing and call a special taxi cab hearing at our January meeting.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That's the 23rd, right?
Correct. May I make one request? I would like to get the application, would you agree to set a date for the deadline for application? I think that's within their authority.
What is good for your office?
Well,
It just says notice of such hearing shall be given to each applicant.
But you have to go through them all, and
we have to go through.
You have a lot of due diligence to do.
If there are a lot of new companies.
I mean, there's rules in the, just the standing rules that I think if you want to be on the agenda, you have to present 10 days prior to the commission hearing.
Yeah. I think, and the rule also speaks to if it's a...
Oh, no, that's who has to appear, has to be notified 10 days before. I'm wrong, sorry. Lisa probably knew that.
Anyway.
Agenda items, here it is. All agenda items to be presented to the commission must be delivered to the commission staff at least 15 days prior to the meeting in order for the items to be considered for the agenda.
It would be very difficult to do the application in 15 days.
Since those are your rules, if you wish to change them, you can kind of amend that rule to say, but for annual and special meetings on new application permits, they need to be submitted.
Really, I'm seeing this as it's going to be tough for your office and you. I would amend my motion and change the special and annual to February. You're going to hit the Christmas season and
I guess, I apologize, I interrupted your motion.
No, go ahead.
What I was going to say, what I was just going to ask, if we could get a deadline in December, what that would do, in other words, what I would hate to do is come around, go through the Christmas holidays and first of the year, New Year's on Broadway, which is going to be an interesting challenge for our office. What I would like to do is at least 30 days prior to that meeting. My preference, if I had a preference, would be December the 13th, I think, is a Friday in December. Now, again, if they can't set that many days...
I'm second guessing my own advice again. If we are actually doing a rule change, we do have to notice that in advance also. So we could be maybe amending or supplementing the rules, but I think it might actually be better to push it back to February and kind of give a chance to...
I was really certain we had established a rule that said 30 days for new permits, and I apologize.
I can make a motion to make this
let me ask a question. What about existing companies? How long do they have to have?
I'm sorry?
Existing companies, the actual meeting without allowing new companies to come on board, because we can do that separately if we need to.
Yes, you can.
So what kind of time frame do they need?
There's a difference. There is a little bit difference between an existing company versus the other companies in terms of materials that are coming in. I don't have to verify drivers or some of those other kind of things that you might with a new company. So
what I'm saying is, I'm just talking out loud here. If we said at our December meeting we would do it for existing companies, we could in essence go back to November of next year and have both at that time.
I think so.
I think you have discretion to set the annual meeting at any point during the year. Because it says it should occur annually, it may be a little bit difficult that we did have one in January last year. But was that our annual meeting? When was the annual meeting? The annual meeting last year was January?
In January.
Somebody make a motion, please.
Well, then we need to keep it in January, correct? I'm just trying to make it work with the schedule.
Would it be easier if we just pushed it off till February?
The staff will we will make whatever the commission wants work. I mean, that's not ridiculous for me to say. We'll do whatever you want us to do. If you'd like to hold your annual meeting in January, if you wanted to hold your annual meeting, if you want to have a special meeting in 3 weeks, I don't care. We will do whatever it takes to get the material in front of you so you can have an opportunity to make a good decision.
Am I making a motion?
Go for it.
I would move to alter my earlier motion and change the annual taxi cab hearing and the special taxi cab hearing to the February month of 2014. All applications should be into Mr. Fields' office by January 15th.
I'll second that motion.
I've got a conflict with February 20th. That would be a potential problem if I mean, it's not. I guess Mr. Turner could just handle it.
Now, why don't we leave it on the 27th then?
There was a holiday issue in February, I think the reason it went away. No, the tweet, y'all have moved to 27.
Right, you've got a trial and I've got a trial the week before.
No,
Again,
leave it on the 27th, and we got a motion on
I didn't think it was going to be an issue because I thought we were going to have our meeting in January.
I said the February month of 2014 in my motion. I never said a date.
Gotcha.
Well, again, I'm comfortable with, again, if there's not a conflict in January and you want to do January, do January. That's, I mean, seriously, if we've already got conflicts with two of them, I'd like to have a full commission, have a full conversation about this, because this
I would
is
draw my motion. How about we move it to March?
No. Let's leave it in January, and then if we pick a date, would you say the 13th or
The 13th is the second Friday. The 18th, is that right? I don't have the...
13th is the second Friday.
Okay.
I will make a motion that all applications for new and existing, for new applications for permits for the special and annual taxi cab hearing in the January month of 2014 will be due in Mr. Field's office by December 13th.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion
Can you
passes.
send out a new list?
I'll recreate. So the only change we've made is we'll leave the annual meeting will be in January. The annual meeting we will change the February meeting to the 20th. Is that staying?
Yes, that's fine.
Then we'll do the emergency record zone meeting on June the 12th, and the rest of the year would stay the same. Is that? That's fine. Okay. I will make that available to you quickly. I'm pretty sure. I'll watch the broadcast again.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. But,
Do we hear a motion? I make a motion, we adjourn?
Any seconds?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.